I stood frozen outside the private room of Le Méridien, my hands trembling around the Ferrari keys I'd planned to surprise Ethan with. 7 years of love, of building future together, crashed around me like shattered glass. How much longer are you going to string Emma along? A deep voice cut through the door. My heart stopped at the sound of my name. The Ferrari keys dug into my palm. Come on, Ethan. Amanda's been asking about you since she got back from Paris. Another voice chimed in, followed by the clink of glasses. To think you've been dating Adam's sister all this time. Someone laughed. Does he even know his best friend's been sleeping with his runaway sister? My brother's name hit me like a punch to the gut. Adam. My brother Adam. The same brother Ethan claimed was just a friend he'd met. The look on his face when he finds out, the voice continued. He won't. Ethan's familiar voice finally broke through. Emma was just convenient. A replacement while Amanda was gone. 7 years is a long replacement. Someone whistled. She made it easy. So desperate for love after her family problems. Ethan's words dripped with cruel amusement. All those stories about knowing her brother, about waiting to tell him until we were married. She believed every word. The keys slipped from my hand, hitting the marble floor with a betraying clatter. The voices inside went quiet. Did you hear that? I didn't wait to hear more. I ran, leaving behind the keys to the Ferrari I'd spent 5 years saving for. Leaving behind 7 years of lies. Leaving behind the second family that had betrayed me. My eye collapsed onto my bed, mascara-stained tears soaking into my pillow. The darkness of room matched the void in my chest. Every memory, every kiss, every promise Ethan had made played through my mind like a cruel movie reel. The front door clicked open. I wiped my face with my sleeve, forcing steady breaths as his footsteps approached our bedroom. Emma? Ethan's voice carried that same warmth I'd fallen for 7 years ago. The bedroom light flicked on. You won't believe what happened at dinner. I rolled over, plastering on a smile. How was it? Great, catching up with everyone. Hello wasn't his tie. The weirdest thing though, security found Ferrari keys outside our private room. Can you imagine someone dropping those? My chest tightened. That's strange. Oh, and tomorrow night we've got plans. He sat on the edge of the bed. My old school friend Amanda's back from Paris. She's hosting a get-together. Amanda. The name burned in my throat. The friend you mentioned before. Yeah, just an old classmate. He waved it off, the lie sliding effortlessly from his lips. You'll come, right? I met his eyes, searching for any trace of guilt, any flicker of the cruel words I'd heard earlier. Nothing. Just the same charming smile that had convinced me he was different from my family. Of course. I forced the words out. Wouldn't miss it. He leaned down to kiss my forehead. Perfect. Get some sleep, babe. The bed shifted as he settled in beside me, his breathing evening out within minutes. I stared at the ceiling, tears silently tracking down my temples into my hair. The next evening, Ethan's hand rested on the small of my back as we entered Amanda's penthouse. His touch burned through my black dress, each gentle squeeze a mockery of affection. Emma, darling, try the champagne. He pressed a crystal flute into my hand, making a show of kissing my temple in front of the gathered crowd. Amanda stood across the room, her red dress matching the flush in her cheeks. Her mascara-rimmed eyes locked onto Ethan's every movement. I excused myself from the crowd, desperate for a moment alone. The hallway leading to the restroom stretched before me. Well, if it isn't the runaway sister. Amanda's voice sliced through the air behind me. I turned to find her leaning against the wall, champagne glass dangling from her manicured fingers. The red dress hugged her curves, making my black one feel childish in comparison. Must be nice, living your perfect little life while your brother dealt with everything alone. Her lips curled into a sneer. Do you know how selfish that makes you? Abandoning family like that. My throat closed up. How did she know about Adam? The details I'd only shared with Ethan. Of course. He'd told her everything, all those late-night conversations where I'd opened up about my past, my fears, my guilt over leaving Adam behind. He'd handed her the weapons to hurt me. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue. She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. You know, Ethan and I have history. Deep history. The kind that doesn't just disappear because some girl played house with him for a few years. I pressed my back against the wall, willing myself not to cry. Tonight's the night, Emma. She drained her champagne. I'm taking him back. He's always been mine. You were just keeping his bed warm while I was in Paris. I couldn't breathe as Amanda moved closer, her red painted lips curving into a cruel smile. Want to know something fun? She traced a finger down my arm. 2 days ago, when you were at that photography workshop, my stomach dropped. Tuesday, he came over to my place first. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But then he had a better idea. Said he wanted to do it in his bed, yours and his. Those silk sheets you love so much. She leaned in, her breath hot against my ear. We made quite a mess of them. My knees buckled. I gripped the wall to stay upright, bile rising in my throat. The way he grabbed my hair, pushed me down, she ran her fingers through her dark locks. God, Emma. The things he did to me that he'd never do with you. He said you were too vanilla, too safe. But me? She laughed. I bring out the animal in him. The memory of Tuesday night flashed through my mind, how I'd crawled into those same sheets, how Ethan had kissed me goodnight in that same bed. Should have seen how fast he stripped those sheets after. Amanda's fingers wrapped around my wrist. Wouldn't want his precious Emma finding out what a bad boy really is. Though I have to say, her grip tightened. The fear of getting caught made it so much hotter. You might also like. Amanda's heels clicked down the hallway, leaving me alone with the weight of her words crushing my chest. I gripped the marble counter, my knuckles white against the stone. The bathroom's soft lighting cast shadows across my face. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. 7 years. 7 years of memories in that bed. The first time he'd pulled me close, whispered that he loved me. Countless Sunday mornings tangled in those silk sheets, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin. Bile rose in my throat. Tuesday. While I'd been learning about aperture settings and shutter speeds, dreaming of capturing our future together, my stomach heaved. I lurched for the toilet, but nothing came up. Just dry, silent retches that shook my whole body. The counter felt cool against my forehead as I pressed it there, fighting back tears. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could see the mascara tracks on my cheeks and know they'd won. The same bed. Our bed. The sheets I'd spent a month's salary on because he'd mentioned loving silk against his skin. He'd taken her there deliberately, tainted every memory we'd built in that space. My reflection trembled in the mirror. I smoothed my hands down my dress, adjusted my hair, forced my breathing to steady. The tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. Not until I was alone, away from their cruel smiles and knowing glances. 7 years of memories, destroyed in one afternoon on silk sheets. I walked back, my legs somehow carrying me forward despite feeling like lead. Ethan and Amanda sat across from each other at a pristine white tablecloth, their soup bowls steaming between them. The picture-perfect couple. My stomach twisted. I slid into the empty chair beside Ethan. His jaw clenched, shoulders tensing as I settled in. The air felt thick enough to choke on. Amanda's red lips curled into that knowing smirk, but the moment Ethan glanced her way, her expression crumpled. Those perfectly lined eyes went wide and wounded, like a kicked puppy. My fingers itched to slap that fake look off her face. What the hell is wrong with you? Ethan's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. What? I stared at him, thrown by the venom in his tone. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. Don't play innocent. How dare you speak to Amanda that way about her mother? Her mother just passed away, and you have the nerve to make cruel comments. My mouth fell open. The room spun slightly. What? I never said anything about stop lying, he snarled. Amanda told me everything about your little bathroom chat. I knew you could be jealous, but this is low, even for you. I gaped between them, my mind reeling. Amanda dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, the picture of grief, while Ethan glared at me like I was something scraped off his shoe. The same man who'd held me last night, kissed my forehead, promised forever. Now he believed this stranger's lies without a second thought. 7 years meant nothing in the face of her tears. The other guests turned to stare, forks frozen halfway to their mouths. Heat crept up my neck as whispers rippled through the room. My humiliation burned deeper with each passing second. Amanda pressed her perfectly manicured fingers to her chest. No, Ethan, it's fine. I understand she's going through things. Her voice wavered as fresh tears welled in her eyes. We shouldn't make a scene. The syrupy sweetness in her voice made my skin crawl. Every sob, every trembling lip a performance worthy of an Oscar. Shut up. The words burst from my throat before I could stop them. Just shut up with your fake crying. The crack of Ethan's palm across my face echoed through the silent room. My cheek stung, but the betrayal in that strike cut deeper than any physical pain. I touched my fingers to the spot, still burning from his hand. Amanda gasped, her eyes wide with mock horror. Oh God, I can't, I need some air. She pushed back from the table, dabbing at her eyes as she rushed toward the exit. Amanda, wait. Ethan jumped up, knocking his chair backward in his haste to follow her. He didn't spare me a single glance as he chased after her, leaving me alone at the table with dozens of judgmental stares boring into me. I stumbled out of Amanda's penthouse, my legs shaking beneath me. The night air hit my face, cooling the spot where Ethan's hand had struck. A yellow cab crawled past and I waved it down, sliding into the leather back seat. Where to, miss? I rattled off my address, then slumped against the window. The city lights blurred through my tears, streaking across my vision like shooting stars. Each sob ripped through my chest, but I couldn't hold them back anymore. 9 years ago, I'd fled from fists and cruel words, leaving everything behind. Now here I was, crying in the back of a cab because I'd let another man hurt me. No more. I wiped my eyes roughly with the back of my hand. I was done letting men like Ethan Shaw destroy me. Done being the weak little girl who ran away. My phone felt heavy in my purse. I pulled it out, scrolling through my contacts until I found his name. Adam. My finger hovered over the number, the same one he'd had 9 years ago when I left. I'd never deleted it, though guilt had stopped me from calling all these years. My brother. The only person who'd tried to protect me back then. Who'd taken the hits meant for me until I couldn't bear to watch anymore. The screen blurred as fresh tears welled up. Before I could second guess myself, I pressed call. 1 ring. 2 rings. The line clicked. Silence stretched between us, heavy with 9 years of unspoken words. Then, his voice. Deep, familiar despite the years between us. Emma? You might also like Adam? My voice cracked. The familiarity of his name on my tongue brought back a flood of memories. How are you? I'm fine, Emma. A pause. Are you okay? You sound sad. My breath caught. After all these years, he could still read me like a book. The lie died on my lips. No, I'm not okay. What happened? I gripped the phone tighter, watching the city lights blur past the cab window. Life here, it's not what I thought it would be. I thought I could make it work, but a tear slid down my cheek. I want to come back, Adam. Come home. No hesitation. No questions. Just 2 words that wrapped around me. Like a warm embrace. I'll send you an address. Stay there until we figure things out. 2 hours later, I sat perched on the edge of a pristine hotel bed, staring at the door. My hands twisted in my lap as footsteps approached from the hallway. The knock made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the door. Part of me dreaded to see Ethan standing there. But when I opened it, I found myself face to face with a stranger. Tall, with tousled dark hair and striking green eyes that seemed to look right through me. A leather jacket hung from his broad shoulders, and the shadow of stubble darkened his jaw. Emma? His voice was deep, with a hint of roughness. I'm Nolan. Adam sent me to check on you. I hesitated in the doorway, studying him. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident but not threatening. His eyes were kind, despite their intensity. May I come in? I stepped aside, letting him enter. The room felt smaller with his presence, though he moved with a casual grace that didn't seem imposing. How are you holding up? His eyes scanned the room, lingering on my hastily packed bag. I'm okay. I crossed my arms, fighting the urge to fidget. Just processing everything. That's understandable. He leaned against the wall, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. So how long have you known my brother? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A while. That's vague. I am a vague person. His response came with a hint of humor but offered no real insight. I tried again. What do you do? Work with Adam. He checked his watch. The limo will be here in 10 minutes. We'll stop by your place first, grab what you need, then head straight to the airport. Limo. I blinked. That's excessive. Standard procedure. Standard for what? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He just smiled, that same mysterious half-smile that revealed nothing. Your brother likes to take care of things properly. The casual mention of a limo, the expensive hotel room, this man who looked like he'd stepped out of an action movie, none of it aligned with the brother I remembered. Adam had always been ambitious, but this level of luxury. Who had he become in these 9 years? You seem surprised, Nolan observed. I just didn't expect all this. The hotel, the limo, I gestured vaguely. Who exactly are you, Nolan? Just someone your brother trusts. He straightened up as his phone buzzed. Limo's early. Ready to go. I stepped into the limo, my fingers trailing over the buttery leather seats. The interior gleamed with polished wood and chrome accents. I shook my head, sinking into the plush seat. Nolan slid in beside me, his presence filling the space. Not what you expected. No. I mean, Ethan has money, but I gestured at our surroundings. This is different. Different how? More refined. Expensive. I traced the leather stitching. I don't know how to explain it. The drive to my apartment passed in a blur of city lights and questions I couldn't voice. Nolan remained quiet, but I felt his eyes on me more than once. The limo pulled up to my building. I'll wait here, Nolan said. Just grab what you need. I nodded and headed inside, my keys jingling in my trembling hands. The elevator ride felt endless. My mind raced. with thoughts of what to pack, what to leave behind. The apartment door opened silently, and as I stepped inside, my world shattered. 21 moans echoed from the bedroom, our bedroom. My feet carried me forward against my will. The door stood ajar, spilling warm lamplight into the hallway. There they were, Ethan and Amanda, tangled in our sheets. His hands in her hair, her legs wrapped around him. They hadn't even heard me come in. My gas caught in my throat. The diamond ring on my finger felt like it was burning into my skin. 7 years of memories crashed down around me as I watched the man I loved kiss another woman in our bed. I stumbled backward, knocking into the hallway table. A frame crashed to the floor, our engagement photo. The glass shattered. They sprang apart. Ethan's eyes met mine, wide with shock. Emma, he scrambled to cover himself. Amanda just smirked, pulling our sheets around her bare shoulders. I turned and ran, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. Ethan's voice called after me, desperate and pleading, but his words blurred into meaningless noise. My vision tunneled as I raced down the stairs, past the carefully curated photos of our life together that now felt like a museum of lies. The cool night air hit my face as I burst through the front door. Nolan stood beside the sleek black limo, his expression shifting from professional detachment to concern as he took in my appearance. Ms. Thorne, where are your bags? I lifted my chin, forcing steel into my voice. I'm not taking anything. Everything in there, it's all tainted now. I want to leave it all behind. My fingers trembled as I twisted the diamond ring off my finger. Please, just take me to the airport. Right now. Nolan's green eyes flickered with understanding. He gave a single, decisive nod and opened the limo door without question. Before sliding in, I turned back toward the house, our house. The ring felt ice cold in my palm. With all my strength, I hurled it at the front door. It made a satisfying ping against the wood before disappearing into the darkness. The limo door closed behind me with a soft thud, sealing me away from the life I'd thought was real. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. I clutched my purse close as we walked through the bustling airport terminal. My legs felt like lead, but Nolan's steady presence beside me kept me moving forward. The crowd parted like water around us. A sea of faces blurred past, but no one stopped us or questioned our path. Airport security nodded at Nolan as we passed, stepping aside without a word. Why is everyone? I glanced around, confused by the deferential treatment. Nolan's hand rested lightly on my lower back, guiding me through another set of doors. Don't worry about it. Just stay close. We emerged onto the tarmac, the night air crisp against my tear-stained cheeks. Commercial planes loomed in the darkness, their lights blinking like stars. Which one are we taking? I asked, scanning the row of aircraft. A smile tugged at the corner of Nolan's mouth. He pointed to the side, where a sleek private jet sat waiting, its polished exterior gleaming under the runway lights. That's our ride, our private jet. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the luxurious aircraft. I don't understand. We have access to certain resources. He gestured toward the jet's stairs. It's safer this way. More private. My head spun. First the VIP treatment through the airport, and now this. Who was this man my brother had sent to help me? What kind of resources allowed for private jets at a moment's notice? Nolan, what's really going on here? He held my gaze for a long moment, his green eyes unreadable in the darkness. Let's get you on board first. Then we can talk. I followed Nolan up the jet stairs, my legs shaking with each step. The interior took my breath away, all polished wood and cream leather seats. Far from the commercial flights I was used to. A flight attendant in a crisp uniform appeared at my side. Ms. Thorne, please let me show you to your seat. 2 more attendants materialized, carrying bottles of water and an array of fresh fruit and snacks. They arranged everything on the table in front of my seat with practiced efficiency. Would you prefer still or sparkling water? One asked, holding both options. Still is fine. I sank into the plush leather seat, watching in bewilderment as they continued to fuss over me. Another attendant appeared with a blanket and pillow. These are Egyptian cotton, Miss Thorne. Please let us know if you need anything else. I caught Nolan's eye across the cabin, silently pleading for some explanation. He gave me a reassuring nod before pulling out his phone. The engines hummed to life as he stepped toward the back of the jet, his voice low but clear in the quiet cabin. Boss, I've picked her up. We'll be back in 2 hours. My stomach twisted. Boss? The way everyone deferred to us, the private jet, the VIP treatment, what kind of world had my brother gotten involved in during our years apart? The flight attendants continued their choreographed dance around me, offering champagne, adjusting the lighting, ensuring my comfort. But my mind was stuck on that one word, boss. I fidgeted in my seat, stealing glances at Nolan across the aisle. Questions burned in my throat, but each time I opened my mouth, he'd flash that disarming smile. Just a bit longer, he kept saying, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. My fingers traced patterns on the leather armrest. Can you at least tell me how you know my brother? Adam will explain everything himself. He leaned back, crossing his long legs. Trust me, it's better coming from him. The flight passed in a blur of luxury and unanswered questions. As we descended, Nolan pulled 2 black face masks from his jacket pocket. Here, he handed one to me. Security protocol. Security. What, Emma? His voice softened. Please. I slipped the mask on, watching him do the same. The fabric was soft against my skin, clearly expensive like everything else about this surreal journey. The airport terminal buzzed with activity, but not the usual chaos I expected. Men in black suits lined our path, their earpieces glinting under fluorescent lights. They nodded at Nolan as we passed, their faces impassive. Outside, a fleet of black vehicles stretched along the curb. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Mercedes, each more luxurious than the last. Nolan guided me to the most impressive one, its black paint gleaming like oil in the sunlight. He opened the rear door with a slight bow. Your chariot awaits. I hesitated at the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had my brother been doing these past 9 years? What kind of world was I stepping into? I slid into the car's plush leather interior. Nolan settled beside me, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. The partition between us and the driver was already up, creating an intimate bubble of silence. The car glided through traffic like we were floating on air. I pressed my face against the tinted window, watching the city blur past until buildings gave way to sprawling estates. My breath caught as we turned onto a private drive. Through the iron gates, a mansion rose before us. Perfectly manicured gardens stretched in every direction, dotted with fountains that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Where are we? I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the magnificent structure. Home, Nolan said simply. The car came to a stop at the base of wide marble steps. Nolan was out first, extending his hand to help me. My legs felt unsteady as I emerged, overwhelmed by the grandeur surrounding me. I took hesitant steps forward, my heels clicking against the stone. The mansion loomed above, its windows gleaming like diamonds. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't the building, it was the man standing at the top of the steps. He stood tall and commanding, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. Power radiated from him like a physical force. But it was his smile that made my heart stutter, a smile I'd know anywhere, even after 9 years. Adam? My voice cracked on his name. I climbed the steps, my vision blurred by tears. Each detail of his face came into focus, the sharp jawline, the intensity in his dark eyes, the subtle creases at their corners. My brother had transformed from the VO young man I'd left behind into someone who commanded attention with his mere presence. Adam? My fingers trembled as I reached up to touch his face, making sure he was real. How are you, little sister? His voice was deeper than I remembered, but held that same warmth. The dam broke. I collapsed against his chest, my tears soaking into his expensive suit. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I left you behind. I was young and scared and shook. His arms wrapped around me, solid and secure. It's fine, Emma. Don't cry, but I couldn't stop. 9 years of guilt and longing poured out as I clung to him. He smelled of cedar and something distinctly expensive, so different from the drugstore cologne he used to wear. He clapped twice, the sound echoing across the marble entrance. 2 maids appeared at his side as if by magic, their uniforms pristine. Take care of my sister, he instructed. Make sure she has everything she needs. As they gently guided me away, I turned back. Adam, what is all this? This mansion, what do you do now? His only response was that same subtle smile, mysterious and unrevealing. The maid steered me through towering double doors, leaving my questions hanging in the air between us. The maids led me to a large suite. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across silk wallpaper. The bed could have fit 5 people comfortably. Your bath is ready, Miss Emma, one maid said, gesturing to a marble bathroom with gold fixtures. I wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows, my fingers trailing across the velvet curtains. In the courtyard below, Adam stood with Nolan, their heads bent in conversation. Nolan glanced up, catching my eye. His smile was warm, genuine. Adam followed his gaze, and his expression softened when he saw me. I stepped back, my heart racing. Who were these men really? What had my brother become in these 9 years? After soaking in a tub filled with rose petals, I dressed in the clothes laid out for me, a black cocktail dress that fit perfectly. The marble stairs curved elegantly down to the first floor. My heels clicked against each step as I descended for dinner. Lost in thought, I crashed into someone. A man in a black suit stumbled back, his face contorting with rage. How dare a mere maid touch me? He raised his hand, fingers curled into a fist. Know your place. The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. Blood sprayed across the white marble as the man crumpled. A neat hole in his temple scream caught in my throat as I turned toward the sound. Nolan stood at the top of the stairs, gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. His eyes were cold, focused, nothing like the warm smile he'd given me minutes ago. I tried to form words, but my throat constricted. The man's lifeless body sprawled across the pristine marble, blood pooling beneath his head. My legs turned to jelly as the metallic scent hit my nostrils. Nolan's footsteps echoed through the hall as he descended. His presence radiated power with each step, the gun still gripped loosely in his hand. The warm, charming man from earlier had vanished, replaced by someone dangerous and lethal. The main doors swung open. Adam strode in, his gaze sweeping from the corpse to me, then to Nolan. No shock registered on his face. No horror. Just calm assessment, as if finding dead bodies in his foyer was an everyday occurrence. What did he do? Adam's voice carried the same casual tone one might use to ask about the weather. Called her a maid. Tried to hit her. Nolan's response was clipped, professional. Adam gave a single nod. The gun. Nolan passed the weapon over without hesitation. The sound of another shot ripped through the air as Adam fired into the already dead body. I flinched, a strangled noise escaping my throat. Adam tucked the gun into his jacket. Clean this up, he called out. Several men in black suits materialized from the shadows, moving with practiced efficiency toward the body. I stood frozen, unable to process how my protective but gentle brother had just shot a dead man with such cold indifference. The marble floor sparkled with blood droplets under the chandelier light. My world tilted sideways as reality crashed in. This wasn't just wealth and success. This was something darker, more dangerous. And my brother stood at its center. My brother's eyes found mine, a flicker of regret crossing his features. I'm sorry you had to see that, Emma, but I won't tolerate even a grain of disrespect toward my sister. Not from anyone. The words caught in my throat as I stared at the pristine floor where moments ago a man had bled out. The cleanup crew had worked with frightening efficiency, not a trace remained of what had happened. Who? My voice cracked. I swallowed hard and tried again. Who are you? What is all this, Adam? A quiet chuckle came from behind me. I turned to find Nolan leaning against the banister, arms crossed. His earlier deadly demeanor had melted away, replaced by that easy charm. Your brother? His green eyes glinted with amusement. He's only the most powerful mafia king in the country. No one crosses Adam Thorne and lives to tell about it. The room spun. I gripped the railing to steady myself, my knuckles white against the polished wood. The brother who used to read me bedtime stories, who taught me to ride a bike, he was a mafia king. Adam shot Nolan a sharp look but didn't deny it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 9 years of secrets. I stared at my brother, trying to reconcile this powerful figure with the teenage boy I'd left behind. The silence hung thick between us until he broke it with a heavy sigh. After you left, Adam's jaw clenched. Dad got worse. The drinking, the violence, it escalated. I stuck it out for 2 more years, thinking I could handle it. I couldn't. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. My breath caught. That was the last night I spent in that house. I packed a bag and hit the streets. Had nothing but the clothes on my back and about $40 to my name. Adam paced the room, his shoulders tense. Started small, picking pockets, breaking into cars. Whatever it took to eat. Then one night, I tried to rob the wrong guy. A bitter laugh escaped him. Or maybe the right one, depending how you look at it. Instead of calling the cops, he offered me a job. The mafia, I whispered. Yeah. Turned out I had a talent for this life. Worked my way up from nothing, learned the business inside and out. When the old boss died 5 years ago, he spread his arms, gesturing to the opulent room around us. I took his place. The weight of his words settled over me. My brother, the mafia king, the protector who'd shielded me from our father's rage, had transformed into something else entirely, something dangerous and powerful. But isn't this wrong? I wrapped my arms around myself, the chill of revelation seeping into my bones. All of this, the violence, the crime. Adam's expression softened. Life isn't black and white, Emma. Sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest futures. He crossed the room to me, his footsteps echoing against the marble. Our parents taught us that family means pain and fear. I chose to redefine it. Here, family means protection, loyalty, strength. His hand settled on my shoulder, warm and steady. You don't need to worry anymore. No one will ever hurt you again, I'll make sure of it. You are in good hands. Nolan pushed off from the wall, that easy smile playing across his features. The Thorne family takes care of their own. Adam nodded. Speaking of which, let me properly introduce you to Nolan DeLuca. He gestured to the man who'd shown such deadly efficiency minutes ago. My right hand, second in command and most trusted ally. Whatever you need, he'll make it happen. Nolan's green eyes met mine, something unreadable flickering in their depths. He extended his hand, and I took it hesitantly. His grip was firm, warm, sending an unexpected spark through my fingers. At your service, Miss Thorne. The corner of his mouth quirked up. Emma nodded, her eyes scanning his handsome features. Little did I know about the mess that was about to happen. I think I need some rest, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The weight of everything crashed down on my shoulders. Ethan's betrayal, Adam's revelation, this whole new world I'd stumbled into. Adam squeezed my shoulder. Of course. Nolan will show you to your suite. I followed Nolan up the sweeping staircase, my feet dragging with exhaustion. He opened a door to reveal a luxurious bedroom that put my apartment to shame. Sleep well, Miss Thorne. Nolan gave a slight bow and disappeared down the hallway. I closed the door and sank onto the plush bed. My phone sat cold and silent in my pocket. No calls, no texts from Ethan. 7 years together, and he couldn't even bother to check if I was okay. The memory of his voice drifted back, laughing with his friends about their cruel joke. Amanda was back. His real love, apparently. And I was just the stand-in, the replacement he'd used to pass the time. I curled onto my side, hugging a pillow to my chest. All those nights we'd spent planning our future, the house we'd buy, the family we'd start, had any of it been real? Or was I just another conquest, Adam's sister he'd dared to pursue? My fingers traced the empty spot where his ring used to sit. 5 years I'd saved for that car, pinching every penny, working overtime, all to surprise the man I thought loved me. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over, soaking into the silk pillowcase. Somewhere out there, was he with her now? Were they laughing about the fool they'd made of me? The thought twisted like a knife in my chest. The massive bed felt too empty, too cold. My phone buzzed against the pillow, the screen lighting up the darkness. Ethan's name flashed across it. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stared at those 5 letters, my finger hovering over the screen. I accepted the call but said nothing, just listened to his breathing on the other end. Emma? His voice cracked. Baby, where are you? Please come home. The tenderness in his tone made me sick. 7 years of lies wrapped in sweet words. I'm not coming back. My voice came out steadier than I felt. What do you mean? Where? I'm in my hometown. The line went dead silent. I heard him swallow hard. What? He choked out. That's impossible. You can't be there. I am chapter S97 Emma. His voice shifted, an edge of panic creeping in. Please tell me you're not with Adam. Tell me you haven't found him. I closed my eyes. Yes, I'm with my brother. No, no, no. His breath came in sharp bursts. You don't understand. You have no idea what he is, what he's capable of. The calm facade cracked, his voice rising to a shout. Get out of there. Do you hear me? Your life is in danger. You need to leave that house right now. Why? My voice came out sharp, cutting through his panic. And what right do you have to care about where I am? You lost that privilege the moment I heard you laughing about your little game with your friends. Emma, please. 7 years, Ethan. 7 years you played me for a fool. This isn't about that. His voice cracked. You don't understand what kind of danger. No, you don't understand. You don't get to act concerned about my welfare now. Not after everything. For God's sake, Emma, listen to me. Adam isn't who you think he is. You need to get out of there before. I sat up straight, anger burning through my exhaustion. Before what? And whose life are you really worried about here, Ethan? Mine or yours? The line went silent. His breathing turned shallow. Emma, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Please, just come home. We can talk about everything. I'll explain everything. Answer my question. I gripped the phone tighter. Who are you really afraid for? He let out a shaky breath. Both of us. You have no idea what you've walked into. I don't care about your warnings, Ethan. I'm done with your lies, done with your games. You had 7 years to be honest with me, to treat me like more than just Adam's little sister you could toy with. Emma, no. I'm happy here with Adam. At least he's shown me more genuine care in one day than you have in years. Don't contact me again. I hung up before he could respond, blocking his number with trembling fingers. The silence of the room pressed in around me. Something nagged at the edge of my thoughts, a detail that didn't quite fit. I sat up straighter, replaying Ethan's panicked words. Wait, how did Ethan know about Adam's current position? He'd spoken about Adam like heck, knew exactly who he was now, not the brother I'd left behind 9 years ago, but the mafia king he'd become just 5 years back. My chest tightened. Ethan had claimed to be Adam's old friend, sure, but that was ancient history. Their supposed friendship predated Adam's rise to power. There's no way Ethan should have known about Adam's current status unless I pulled my knees to my chest, mind racing. Either Ethan had been keeping tabs on my brother all these years, or he was more connected to this world than he'd let on. Neither option settled well in my stomach. The luxury suite suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage of questions. What else had Ethan been hiding? And more importantly, what was the real connection between him and my brother? Questions swirled in my head as I drifted off to sleep, my mind a maze of betrayals and half-truths. The soft mattress couldn't ease the weight of uncertainty pressing down on my chest. Warmth against my palm pulled me from troubled dreams. My eyes fluttered open to find Nolan's figure beside the bed, his strong hand wrapped in mine. Steam rose from the coffee cup in his other hand, the rich aroma filling the air. I jerked upright, yanking my hand back. "What are you doing here?" Those piercing green eyes locked onto mine, studying my face before his lips curved into a gentle smile. "You were crying in your sleep." He set his coffee down on the nightstand. "I came to check on you early this morning, found you tossing and turning." Heat crept into my cheeks. "So you just stayed?" "You grabbed my hand." He flexed his fingers, as if remembering the touch. "Only then did you calm down." Seemed cruel to leave after that. I touched my cheeks, feeling the dried trails of tears I hadn't known I'd shed. The memory of my dreams slipped away like smoke, leaving only an echo of distress behind. But there was something steadying about Nolan's presence, a quiet strength that made the morning feel less daunting. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what exactly I was apologizing for. "Don't be." He reached for his coffee again. "We all have our demons. Sometimes it helps just knowing someone's there to face them with you." His words sank deep into my chest, stirring something I thought had died after Ethan's betrayal. I studied Nolan's profile in the soft morning light, the sharp line of his jaw, the subtle shadows under his eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. Everything about him radiated danger, from the way he held himself to the calculated grace of his movements. Adam's right-hand man, the enforcer, the shadow that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Yet here he sat, offering me coffee and comfort after a nightmare. My fingers traced the warm ceramic of the mug he'd brought, focusing on its solid presence to ground myself. "You don't seem like what I expected." "And what did you expect?" The corner of his mouth lifted, those green eyes dancing with amusement. "Someone colder, more murderous." I flinched at his bluntness, but he just chuckled, the sound low and rich. The dangerous edge never left him. It was there in the coiled strength of his shoulders, the vigilant way he positioned himself between me and the door. But rather than frightening me, it wrapped. "Adam wants you to meet your parents," Nolan said, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. "Asked me to take you there." "Where is he?" The question burst from my lips before I could stop it. After 9 years of silence, Adam couldn't even face me himself. Nolan's deep chuckle filled the room. "He's busy deleting an entire clan of mafias." My blood ran cold. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I gripped the bedsheets tighter. The Adam I remembered used to patch up my scraped knees, sneak me extra desserts, and read me bedtime stories. Now he orchestrated mass killings. The sweet boy who'd protected me from our parents' rage had transformed into someone who made others disappear. My stomach churned at the thought of how Hapter 10 much blood stained his hands now. Mafia King. The title echoed in my head. I'd heard whispers, of course everyone had. The ruthless leader who'd risen to power 5 years ago, whose name alone made hardened criminals tremble. But connecting that figure to my brother felt impossible. My throat tightened. What did this mean for him? For me? Every day must be a dance with death, every moment shadowed by the possibility of betrayal or revenge. And now that I was back in his life, did that put me in the crosshairs too? Ethan's warnings over the phone about my brother suddenly took on new meaning. Had he been trying to protect me from this world all along? Or had he been using my brother's reputation for his own games? "Miss Thorne," Nolan's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. His hand hovered near mine, not quite touching, but offering support all the same. I stared at his outstretched fingers, remembering they too must be stained with violence. Yet here he sat, gentle and patient, waiting for my response about visiting the parents I'd fled from so long ago. "Take me to them." The words felt heavy on my tongue. After everything, maybe facing my past was the only way forward. Nolan's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't read. "As you wish, Miss Thorne." I changed into a simple black dress, ran a brush through my hair, and grabbed my purse. My hands trembled as I checked my reflection one last time. Outside, a sleek black Mercedes waited, its polish gleaming under the afternoon sun. Nolan stood by the passenger door, opening it with a slight bow. The leather seats were cool against my skin as I slipped inside. The familiar streets of my hometown rolled past the tinted windows. But something felt off. These weren't the streets that led to my childhood house. The neat rows of homes gave way to wider roads bordered by tall trees. My stomach knotted as we turned onto an unfamiliar path. The car slowed, and through the windshield I saw large iron gates flanked by pristine white walls. Above them, black letters spelled out Riverside Mental Health Facility. What? My voice caught in my throat as Nolan pulled up to the entrance. My heels clicked against the sterile floor as I followed Nolan through the winding corridors. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils, mixing with something else, the unmistakable scent of decay and despair that lingered in these places. My mind raced. Mom or Dad? Which one would I find behind these walls? The last time I'd seen them, Dad had raised his hand, his face twisted in rage. I ducked, but the blow never came. Adam had stepped between us. Nolan's broad shoulders led the way past numbered doors, each one identical to the last. His steps were measured, purposeful. He hadn't spoken a word since we'd entered, but his silence told me enough. We stopped at room. Through the small window, I saw a figure hunched in the corner. Gray hair where there used to be black. Shoulders that once squared with authority now curved inward. My father sat there, muttering to himself, his hospital gown hanging loose on his frame. His fingers traced patterns on the wall, the same motion over and over. The man who'd terrorized my childhood had shrunk into this shell. My throat closed up. The strength drained from my legs. I pressed my palm against the cold wall to steady myself. Why? The words scraped past my lips. But Nolan remained silent, his presence solid beside me as I stared at the stranger my father had become. Dad's head snapped up. His eyes met mine. Through the window, but there was no recognition there. Just confusion, then fear. He scrambled further into his corner, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. No, 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 he chanted, covering his face with trembling hands. The shadows are back. They're watching. Always watching. I stepped back, my heel catching on the smooth floor. My shoulder bumped against Nolan's chest, but I barely registered the contact. This broken man couldn't be my father. The tyrant who'd ruled our home with iron fists and razor words had dissolved into this frightened creature. There's more. Nolan's fingers wrapped around my wrist, gentle but firm. He guided me forward, past my father's window and toward another room. My breath caught in my throat. Behind the second window, a woman with matted gray hair rocked back and forth on a metal bed. Her once proud shoulders hunched inward, her hospital gown hanging loose on her frail frame. Mom? The word came out as a whisper. TT. Her vacant eyes stared at the wall, her lips ving in silent conversation with ghosts. Why? She could see. The strong-willed woman who'd wielded her words like weapons had vanished, leaving behind this hollow shell. My knees buckled. Nolan caught me before I hit the floor, pulling me against his chest. The dam broke. Tears soaked into his shirt as sobs racked my body. These broken people, they'd hurt us, scarred us, driven us away. But seeing them reduced to this, why? I clutched at Nolan's jacket. How could this happen? Drugs. His hand moved in slow circles on my back. After you and Adam left, they spiraled. Started with pills, then harder stuff. The addiction ate away at their minds until there was nothing left. I pressed my face harder against him, trying to block out the sight of what remained of my parents. The mixture of grief and relief and guilt threatened to tear me apart. They'd been monsters, but they were still my parents. Still the ones who'd given Adam and me life, even if they'd made that life hell. I shouldn't care, I whispered. After everything they did, they're your parents. Nolan's voice rumbled in his chest. It's okay to feel this way. Adam's been taking care of them, Nolan murmured into my hair. Pays for their treatment, visits every week. Has for the past 4 years, since they hit rock bottom. My brother. My chest ached. All this time, he'd shouldered this burden alone. While I'd hidden away, building my life with a man who'd betrayed me, Adam had picked up the pieces of our broken family. He never told me. I pulled back, wiping my tears with shaking hands. He wanted to protect you. Nolan's thumb brushed a stray tear from my cheek. The gentle touch sent warmth spreading through my chest. That's what big brothers do. His eyes held mine, green and intense. Something shifted in the air between us. Come on. He placed his hand on the small of my back, steering me away from the windows. Let's get out of here. Back in his car, I sank into the leather seat, emotionally drained. Nolan slid behind the wheel, his movements fluid and controlled. Even exhausted, I couldn't help noticing how his muscles flexed as he gripped the steering wheel. You know what you need. He shot me a sideways glance, a playful glint in his eyes. Retail therapy. I raised an eyebrow. A dangerous man suggesting shopping. That's a first. I'm full of surprises. His lips curved into a smirk. Besides, watching you try on clothes beats paperwork any day. Heat crept up my neck. Careful, DeLuca. That almost sounded like flirting. Maybe it was. He winked, starting the engine. Is it working? Despite everything, the heartbreak, my parents, the weight of Adam's sacrifice, I found myself smiling. Maybe I stepped out of Nolan's car, my jaw dropping at the sight of Crystal Palace Mall. The gleaming glass structure stretched toward the sky, its chrome fixtures catching the sunlight. Close your mouth before you catch flies. Nolan's hand found the small of my back. I used to press my nose against these windows as a kid. I fidgeted with the hem of my simple black dress. Never actually went inside. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a blast of cool air scented with expensive perfume. Women in designer outfits strutted past, their heels clicking on marble floors. A group of them gave me a once-over, their perfectly painted lips curling. I shrank closer to Nolan. Everyone's staring, let them stare. His voice dropped lower, that dangerous edge creeping in. You're with me. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. He chuckled, steering me toward a high-end boutique. Pick something. Now. But these prices, did I stutter? His green eyes flashed. Choose, or I'll choose for you. The command in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This was the man who stood at my brother's right hand, who made hardened criminals quake. Fine. I grabbed a sleek emerald cocktail dress. Happy, ecstatic. He pulled out a black credit card. Change. Then we shop properly. You're enjoying this way too much. Sweetheart, his grin turned wolfish. You have no idea. The saleswoman practically tripped over herself when she saw Nolan's card. Right this way, miss. Our private fitting room is available. I shot Nolan a look. Show off. He just winked, settling into a plush chair outside the fitting room. Consider it payment for the entertainment. I stepped out of the fitting room, smoothing down the emerald silk that hugged my curves. The dress fit perfectly, the hem falling just above my knees. My reflection caught me off guard. I barely recognized myself. Nolan's sharp intake of breath drew my attention. His eyes darkened as he rose from his chair, prowling toward me with that predatory grace. Anyone looks at you wrong, he growled low enough only I could hear, they'll be fishing their teeth out of the fountain. My heart stuttered in my chest. The casual way he delivered that threat shouldn't have affected me, but heat bloomed across my cheeks. You can't just say things like that, I whispered. Watch me. He guided me out of the boutique, his hand returning to its spot on my back. Got somewhere special to take you. Going to tell me where? And ruin the surprise? His fingers traced circles on my spine. Not a chance, princess. We passed storefronts gleaming with jewelry and designer bags. I caught glimpses of our reflection, me in the emerald dress, him in his dark suit. We looked right together. His phone buzzed. The playful expression vanished as he checked the screen. He ran a hand through his hair. Need to take this. Mind wandering for a bit? Everything okay? Just business. His jaw tightened. Shouldn't take long. If you need me, just call my name, I'll be within earshot. That's not ominous at all. Emma. The way he said my name made me shiver. Trust me. I nodded, watching as he stepped away to answer the call, his voice dropping to that dangerous tone he used for business. Part of me didn't want to know what that meant. I wandered into another boutique, running my fingers over racks of silk blouses and designer jeans. The emerald dress swished around my legs as I moved through the store. A cream sweater caught my eye, soft and elegant without being flashy. A sharp whistle pierced the air. 3 guys lounged near the entrance, their eyes raking over me. My skin crawled. Hey beautiful, give us a spin in that dress. I clutched the sweater tighter, turning away from them. My hands trembled as I pretended to examine a display of scarves. Come on baby, don't be like that. Heavy footsteps approached. We just want to talk. Not interested. I moved toward the exit, but they shifted to block my path. The tallest one grinned, showing too many teeth. Playing hard to get? That's cute. My heart hammered against my ribs. The store clerk was nowhere in sight. I backed up, bumping into a rack of clothes. Leave me alone. Or what? The third guy stepped closer. You gonna? A massive shadow fell over them. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Or I'll break every finger you used to point at her. It was Nolan DeLuca. Or I'll break every finger you used to point at her. Nolan's voice was soft, deadly. Then I'll start getting creative. The color drained from their faces as they spun around. Nolan towered over them, his green eyes glacial. The casual charm was gone, replaced by something that made even my blood run cold. We didn't know she was with anyone, the tall one stammered. That shouldn't matter. Nolan's hand shot out, gripping the guy's collar. Apologize. Now. Sorry miss. They practically tripped over themselves, backing away. If I see you near her again, Nolan let the threat hang in the air. They fled, nearly running into a display in their haste to escape. My heart thundered in my chest, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. Thank you. The words came out softer than I intended, my voice shaky. The dangerous glint in his eyes melted away, replaced by warmth that caught me off guard. You're welcome. He straightened his leather jacket. Remember that surprise I mentioned earlier? I nodded, still rattled from everything that had happened. Come with me first. He gestured toward the elevator. There's something you need to see on the top floor. The elevator ride was quiet but not uncomfortable. Nolan's presence beside me felt steady, safe. The doors opened to reveal a sprawling food court with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Beautiful view, isn't it? Nolan's lips curved into a smile. But that's not why we're here. He turned to face me fully. Emma, this entire mall. It's yours. I blinked. What? Your brother bought it. The deed's in your name. My mouth went dry. The mall? Mine? I gripped the railing, staring at the glittering expanse below. Yesterday flashed through my mind the gunshot, Adam's cold face as he fired into the already dead body. We hadn't spoken since. The weight of years of silence hung between us, punctuated by that single violent moment. But why? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Nolan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then held it out to me. Speaking of your brother, my hands trembled as I took the phone. Hello, Emma. Adam's voice was warm, a stark contrast to yesterday's tension. Did Nolan show you the mall? Adam, I don't understand. Do you like it? There was an eagerness in his tone I hadn't heard since we were kids. I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have something stable. Something that's yours alone. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching people move like ants below. Not much. Adam, this is insane. We've barely talked in years and now I know. He paused. Consider it 9 years. Of missed birthdays and Christmases. Plus interest. A laugh bubbled up, half hysterical. That's not how this works. It is now. The papers are already signed. It's yours, no strings attached. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. But Adam, all I really want is to spend time with my big brother again. We've lost so many years. Emma, his voice softened. I'm sorry. I'm in Italy right now on business. I'll be back in a couple of days, I promise. The crack of gunfire exploded through the phone. My heart leaped into my throat. Adam, it's fine. His voice changed, turning to ice. Gone was my gentle brother. This was someone else entirely. Just dealing with some dogs who thought they could stand against me. More shots rang out. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. You see, little sister, Adam continued, his tone eerily calm against the backdrop of violence. Sometimes people need to learn their place. And right now, I'm teaching these mutts exactly where they belong. A scream pierced the background, cut short by another gunshot. Adam, what are you just finishing up here? The cold satisfaction in his voice sent chills down my spine. These dogs won't be bothering anyone again. I caught Nolan watching me, his expression unreadable. My hands shook as I held the phone, trying to reconcile this stranger's voice with memories of my protective older brother. I'll see you soon, Emma. Adam's voice softened again, though the chill lingered. Nolan will take care of everything until I return. Trust him like you'd trust me. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind spinning with questions. He means well. Nolan gently took his phone back. Your brother would do anything to protect you. By having you babysit me. By making sure you're safe. He leaned against the railing. And I promised him I would. My fingers traced patterns on the cool glass. Do I have a choice? Always. His green eyes met mine. But I hope you'll let me help. As we stepped into the elevator, my mind still reeling from Adam's phone call. The silence stretched between us until we reached the parking lot. Why do I need protection, Nolan? I clutched my purse closer. What aren't you telling me? Nolan's jaw tightened. He placed a hand on my lower back, steering me toward his car. The Rossi family's been circling like vultures. They want to tear down everything your brother built. His voice dropped, a dangerous edge creeping in. And now that you're back, they'll use any weakness they can find. Weakness? My steps faltered. He spun me around, his hands gripping my shoulders. They'll come after you to get to him. His green eyes blazed with an intensity that made my breath catch. But I won't let them touch what's mine to protect. My heart stuttered at his possessive tone. The way he said mine sent electricity down my spine. Your brother's empire stretches across 3 continents, Emma. The Rossis would love nothing more than to watch it burn. His thumb traced circles on my shoulder. And they'll use anyone, family, friends, lovers, to make it happen. I swallowed hard, caught between fear and something else entirely as his gaze held mine. Is that why you're going to be following me? Following, watching, protecting. He stepped closer, his voice a low growl. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. I stepped back from Nolan, my head spinning with questions about Adam's empire. But how did my brother even? The screech of tires cut through the garage. BSPA black sedan barreled straight at me, headlights blazing. My muscles locked. The world narrowed to the approaching death. A powerful arm wrapped around my waist. Nolan yanked me off my feet, throwing me over his shoulder in one fluid motion. The car missed us by inches, so close the wind from its passing whipped my hair. My chest slammed against Nolan's back as he pivoted, keeping his body between me and the threat. The car's tinted window rolled down as it sped past. Through my upside-down view, I caught a glimpse of a face I'd never seen. "Fucking Salvatore," Nolan growled, his grip on my thighs tightening. The sound rumbled through his body and into mine. The sedan's tires squealed as it took the corner, leaving the acrid smell of burnt rubber in its wake. My heart hammered against my ribs, the adrenaline making my fingers tingle where they gripped Nolan's leather jacket. "Put me down," I gasped, though my body betrayed me by clinging closer. Nolan practically threw me into the passenger seat, slamming the door before I could catch my breath. In seconds, he was behind the wheel, the engine roaring to life. "Hold on." He gunned it, tires screeching against concrete as we shot toward the exit. My fingers dug into the leather seat. "Who was that?" My voice shook. The garage lights flashed past in a dizzying strobe. Nolan took a hard left, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. A Serbi Salvatore. Right-hand man to the Rossi family boss. He checked the mirrors, weaving through traffic with practiced precision. "They've got eyes everywhere, must have picked up that you're back in the city. But I just got here. How could they? Information's currency in our world, Emma. People pay well for it." He cursed under his breath, cutting across 3 lanes to take the highway entrance. "The Rossis have moles in every corner of this city." The speedometer crept past 90 as we raced back toward the mansion. Buildings blurred past my window, the city lights stretching into streaks of neon. My heart refused to slow its frantic beating. "They've been waiting for an opening like this. Your brother's been too careful, too protected. But you," he glanced at me, jaw clenched. "You're new. Unknown. A crack in the armor they've been searching for." The reality of my situation hit harder than that car almost had. I wasn't just Adam's long-lost sister anymore. I was a target in a game I never knew existed. Nolan's phone buzzed. He answered through the car's Bluetooth. "Yeah, get her back to the mansion. Now." Adam's voice filled the car, cold and commanding. They made their move faster than we expected. "Already on our way. 10 minutes out. Make it 5. You might also like sorry Alpha I got over you sorry, Alpha I got over you white bane mistaken groom night glow rejecting the cold." The car screeched to a halt in front of the mansion. Before I could reach for my seatbelt, Nolan yanked open my door. His arms slipped under my knees and behind my back, lifting me against his chest. "I can walk, not taking chances." His voice vibrated through his chest where my head rested. The mansion's front doors burst open as Nolan carried me inside. Guards materialized from every direction, their faces grim. "Lock down the perimeter," Nolan barked. "Double the patrols, arm everyone. No one gets within half a mile without clearance." His arms tightened around me as he issued orders. "Check every camera feed from the past 6 hours. I want to know how Salvatore's men slipped through." The guards scattered, phones pressed to their ears. Metal shutters slid down over windows. Locks clicked into place. Throughout the house, my fingers curled into Nolan's shirt without my permission. Yesterday, I hadn't known he existed. Now his heartbeat thundered against my palm, strong and steady while my world spun out of control. His thumb brushed my arm, such a gentle touch from hands I'd seen break a man's nose. The contrast made my breath catch. No one had protected me like this before. Not my parents, not Ethan. But here was Nolan, holding me like I was precious, issuing commands to keep me safe. Heat bloomed in my chest as I watched his jaw clench, green eyes scanning for threats. Even inside these walls, the devotion in his actions struck deeper than words ever could. I couldn't deny it, I was feeling some sort of way already. "Sir, the security feeds are ready," a guard called from down the hall. "Keep her safe," Nolan growled to the nearest guard. But he didn't set me down. Instead, he carried me toward the security room, as if he couldn't bear to let me go. Nolan lowered me into a plush leather chair in the security room. Screens lined the walls, showing different angles of the mansion grounds. "Get her whatever she needs," he told the maid hovering nearby. He turned to me, his expression softening. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" I shook my head, but my stomach betrayed me with a growl. His lips twitched. Bring her some pasta and fresh juice, he instructed the maid. And maybe some of those chocolate cookies from the kitchen. For the next few hours, I watched him work. His focus was absolute as he scanned through footage, rewinding and fast-forwarding, checking timestamps and camera angles. The maid brought food and drinks, which I picked at while my mind raced with questions about this new world I'd stumbled into. Nolan's shoulders grew tenser with each passing hour. He'd mutter under his breath, run his hands through his hair in frustration. The sound of tires on gravel caught my attention. On one of the screens, a black SUV pulled up to the mansion entrance. My breath caught as a familiar figure stepped out. Adam burst through the security room door moments later. Emma. His eyes swept over me, checking for injuries. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, I managed. Just scared. Nolan straightened from his hunched position over the monitors. Boss, I've gone through everything. No sign of unauthorized entry, no tampering with the cameras. But they got in somehow. Adam's jaw clenched. A mole. Has to be. Nolan crossed his arms. Someone who knows our protocols, our blind spots. They're feeding information to Salvatore. I watched my brother's face twist with emotion as he turned to me. Emma, I'm so sorry. His hand brushed my cheek, the gesture achingly familiar despite our years apart. I promised to protect you, and I failed. He spun toward the nearest guard, his entire demeanor shifting. The tenderness vanished, replaced by cold authority. Get every security member on the front porch. Now. I don't care if they're sleeping, eating, or taking a shit. 5 minutes. The guard's phone was already at his ear before Adam finished speaking. Through the monitors, I watched figures in black rushing across the grounds, converging on the mansion's entrance. Adam's fingers drummed against his thigh as he glanced at the screens. I want answers, he growled, and someone's going to give them to me. I followed Adam and Nolan outside, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The night air hit my face as we stepped onto the grand porch where rows of guards stood at attention. Their rigid postures betrayed their fear. Adam's presence filled the space, darker and more menacing than the shadows around us. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Even I shivered, and not from the cold. This was a side of my brother I'd never seen before. Nolan broke away from us, stalking between the lines of guards like a predator sizing up prey. His green eyes narrowed as he studied each face, lingering just long enough to make them squirm. Some couldn't meet his gaze, others tried too hard to appear innocent. Someone here, Adam's voice cut through the silence, low and lethal, has betrayed 06ILOFMY trust. Has endangered my sister. His words carried across the porch, each syllable dripping with barely contained rage. When I find out who fed information to Salvatore, he paused, letting the tension build. I will ensure your bloodline suffers for generations to come. Your children, their children, and their children. After them they'll curse the day you chose to cross me. The guards shifted uncomfortably, several swallowing hard. One man's hand trembled, so badly he had to clench it into a fist. The Thorne family has a long memory, Adam continued, his tone growing colder with each word, and an even longer reach. There won't be a corner of this earth where your descendants can hide from what's coming. If anyone wishes to confess now, Adam's voice softened to an almost gentle tone that somehow made it more terrifying, I'll grant you a quick death. Your family will be spared, they can live their lives in peace. His eyes swept across the guards. This is a one-time offer. My stomach churned. The brother who used to so kind now spoke of death and bloodlines with such casual authority. The guards remained frozen, no one daring to step forward. Sweat glistened on more than a few foreheads despite the cool night air. Adam gave a slight nod. Very well. He turned to me, placing his hand on my lower back to guide me inside. Nolan fell into step behind us, his footsteps nearly silent on the polished floor. Once we were in Adam's office, he closed the door and faced me. Nolan will stay with you today. I don't want you alone until we handle this. He moved behind his desk, already pulling out his phone. I'm reaching out to my contacts, we'll find out how Salvatore learned about you. I sank into one of the leather chairs, my mind still reeling from everything I'd witnessed. Adam paused his typing and looked up at me, his expression softening for the first time tonight. Emma, it's been 9 years. He set the phone down. We haven't had a chance to really talk yet. I've missed you, more than you know. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Once I deal with Salvatore permanently, we'll have time to catch up properly. There's so much to discuss. I nodded, unable to find words as I tried to reconcile this new version of my brother with the one from my memories. I watched Adam stride out of the office, his footsteps fading down the hallway. A warm presence settled next to me. Nolan perched on the edge of the desk, close enough that I caught a hint of leather and cologne. His green eyes found mine, softer than they'd been out on the porch. I'll protect you with my life." Miss Thornehey's voice carried absolute conviction. "No harm will come to you while I'm around." The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "Because Adam asked you to." A low chuckle rumbled from his chest as he shook his head. His lips curved into a crooked smile that sparked something in my memory, a flash of recognition I couldn't quite place. "No." He leaned closer, those striking eyes dancing with amusement. "Don't you remember me at all? You might also like, remember?" I furrowed my brow, searching his face for any hint of familiarity. The green eyes, the strong jawline, nothing clicked into place. "I thought so." Nolan's smile turned wistful. "We went to Lincoln High together. Different classes though. I was that scrawny kid always hunched in the back corner of the cafeteria." Lincoln High. The name brought back memories of brick walls and squeaky linoleum floors. "You probably don't remember, but there was this day in the cafeteria. Some seniors were hassling me, knocked my lunch tray over." His eyes softened at the memory. "This girl I'd never met marched right up, got between us. Told them off so badly they actually apologized." "That was you." Heat crept into my cheeks. I did. Changed my life that day. Never had anyone stand up for me before." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "Been carrying a torch for you ever since. 10 years now." My mouth fell open. 10 years. Even when you disappeared, I kept tabs. Made sure you were safe from a distance." He glanced away, almost shy. "Probably sounds creepy, but I just needed to know you were okay. You've been watching over me all this time." The revelation sent my head spinning. All those years I thought I was alone. Someone had been looking out for me, this boy I'd forgotten I'd helped, now transformed into the dangerous-looking man before me. Hard to believe, right? Nolan's crooked smile returned. "The bullied kid grew up to be your brother's right hand. Life's funny that way." I stared at him, trying to process this bombshell. 10 years of silent devotion from someone I barely remembered. The weight of it left me speechless. "When you came back," Nolan leaned forward, his voice dropping. "It felt like fate giving me another chance. Not to pursue anything," he added quickly. "Just to protect you the way you protected me back then." My heart skipped. The intensity in his eyes, the raw honesty, it hit different than Ethan's practiced charm. "I know you're dealing with a lot right now. The last thing you need is some guy dumping his decade-old feelings on you." He gave a self-deprecating laugh. "But I want you to know I'm here. Not expecting anything back. Just wanting to keep you safe." The warmth in my chest spread. Here was someone who'd carried a memory of my kindness for years, who'd watched over me from afar without demanding anything in return. So different from Ethan's calculated pursuit. I opened my mouth, wanting to tell him how his words touched something in me, how his presence made the world feel steadier. But before I could speak, DeLuca. Adam's voice cut through the moment. "Get yourself in here." Nolan straightened, professionalism sliding back over his features. "Duty calls." He touched my shoulder briefly as he passed. "Think about what I said." I watched him disappear down the hallway, my skin still tingling where he'd touched me. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. I was falling for him. Not because he'd saved me, not because he'd confessed, but because of who he was, someone who'd held onto kindness for a decade, who offered protection without strings. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Ethan's name. My stomach dropped. After 3 rings, I answered, ready to tell him exactly where he could shove his excuses. "Emma, don't you dare shut up and listen." His voice carried none of its usual charm. "We need to meet. And before you hang up, this isn't about us. I couldn't care less about you anymore." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Then why your precious brother Adam? He's in danger. And so am I." He laughed, cold and hollow. "Funny how things work out, isn't it? You're probably feeling betrayed, lost, angry." "What are you talking about?" "Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Come alone." His tone turned smug. "And Emma, if you tell anyone about this call, if you bring anyone with you, your brother dies. Simple as that." "You re-bluffing, try me. I've got nothing left to lose." The line went dead. "You might also like sorry." I stared at my phone, hands shaking. The warmth from my moment with Nolan evaporated, replaced by ice in my veins. What did Ethan mean about Adam being in danger? The threat in his voice had been real. Whatever game he was playing, he meant every word. I set my phone down, my fingers trembling. Ethan's words echoed through my mind. Adam was in danger. My brother. After all these years apart, I couldn't let anything happen to him. My chest tightened. I couldn't tell anyone, not even Nolan. The information would get back to Adam through him. The thought of Nolan's concerned face made my stomach twist. I had to handle this myself. Tomorrow. I needed to meet with Ethan tomorrow, find out what this was about, but I'd need an excuse to get away. The door clicked open and Nolan stepped in, his green eyes landing on me. The intensity of his gaze made me want to confess everything, but I pushed the urge down. Hey, my voice came out shaky. I cleared my throat. I've been sitting here thinking, and I'm just so stressed. I can't get my mind off everything. Not entirely a lie. Would you take me to the mall again? I need a distraction. Nolan's brow furrowed. He shifted his weight, conflict clear on his face. I knew he was thinking about the danger, about Adam's instructions to keep me safe. Please, I added softly. Just for a little while. He ran a hand through his dark hair, then nodded slowly. All right, but we stick together, no wandering off. Of course. The guilt of my deception burned in my throat. But I had no choice. Whatever Ethan was involved in, whatever threat he posed to my brother, I had to find out. And I had to do it alone. The next day, the setting sun painted the city in shades of amber as Nolan and I headed to the mall. My stomach churned with guilt every time I caught his green eyes watching me, protective and caring. His confession from yesterday played in my mind, 10 years of carrying feelings for me, watching from afar. The tenderness in his voice when he'd told me still made my heart flutter. You okay? Nolan's hand brushed my lower back as we walked through the mall entrance. You seem distracted. Just processing everything. I managed a weak smile. We wandered past storefronts, but I barely registered the displays. Nolan stayed close to his tall frame, a constant presence at my side. His vigilance, usually comforting, now felt suffocating. I needed to get away, to meet Ethan, to save my brother, but Nolan's watchful gaze never wavered. After an hour of browsing, I spotted my chance. I need to use the restroom, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Nolan's eyes scanned the area before he nodded. I'll wait right here. My heels clicked against the tile as I walked to the ladies' room, feeling his gaze on my back. Inside, I checked the stalls were empty before pulling out my phone. Ethan's message glowed on the screen, food court minutes. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Nolan would be standing guard, just as promised. My hands trembled as I pulled out my compact mirror and checked around the corner. There the service corridor exit, just as I'd remembered from previous visits. JAOR guilt crashed over me as I slipped through the door. Nolan had trusted me, protected me, cared for me. But Adam's life was at stake. I had no choice. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan, emergency exit by the loading dock. Now. The service corridor stretched ahead, dim fluorescent lights casting shadows. My heels echoed against concrete as I hurried past stacks of cardboard boxes and metal shelving. The red exit sign glowed at the end of the hall. I pushed the bar and stepped into the evening sun. The loading dock was deserted, delivery trucks long gone for the day. Wind whipped my hair as I scanned the empty lot. A screech of tires. Before I could turn, rough hands grabbed me from behind. I tried to scream, but a cloth pressed over my mouth, dark fabric blocking my vision. My legs kicked uselessly as they hauled me up. Metal doors slammed. An engine revved. The van lurched forward, throwing me against the floor. Through the darkness, cruel laughter cut the air. You really are as naive as they say. You might also like. Ethan's voice dripped with mockery. A few texts about your precious brother being in danger, and you come running like an obedient little puppy. My stomach dropped. The brother story, it had been a trap. And I'd fallen for it completely. 7 years pretending to love you wasn't enough entertainment. His laugh echoed in the van. I had to see just how far you'd go, how easily I could manipulate you one last time. I struggled against the bindings, tears soaking into the blindfold. The van hit a bump, my shoulder slamming into metal. Ethan's laughter mixed with other voices I didn't recognize. Why are you doing this? My voice cracked, fear clawing at my throat. You'll know soon enough, sweetheart. Ethan's voices nails with a knife. The click of expensive shoes on concrete drew my attention to the doorway. Ethan strolled in, hands in his pockets, that perfect smile I'd once loved now twisted into something cruel. Welcome to the party, Emma. He spread his arms wide, laughing. I must say, you've exceeded all my expectations. 7 years of blind devotion. That's quite the achievement. Why? I choked out through tears. Why pretend for so long? Why make me believe in a future that was never real? Ethan leaned against a rusted metal pillar, loosening his tie. Your brother hired me 7 years ago. Simple job, really track you down, keep you safe, report back to him. His lips curved into a bitter smile. Adam was climbing the ranks fast back then. Needed someone to watch over his precious little sister while he built his empire. The words hit like physical blows. Adam, Maria, empire. My head spun as pieces clicked into horrible place. I was supposed to stay in the shadows, just observe from a distance. But watching Adam have everything, the power, the respect, the fear in people's eyes when they heard his name, Ethan's face twisted. I wanted to take something from him. Something he actually cared about. Me. The word barely made it past my lips. You made it so easy. He pushed off the pillar, stalking closer. One smile, one story about knowing your brother, and you fell right into my arms. 7 years of playing the perfect boyfriend while feeding Adam carefully filtered updates about his sister's safe, happy life. My chest felt hollow. Every kiss, every whispered promise, every shared dream, all lies crafted from spite. Did you ever? I swallowed hard. Did any 97 of it mean anything? No. His voice was ice. You were just a way to stick it to your brother. The great Adam Thorne's sister, wrapped around my finger, planning our wedding while he had no idea I'd turned his protection detail into my own personal game. A figure emerged from the shadows, the click of heels against concrete making my blood run cold. My eyes widened as Amanda sauntered into view, but gone was the demure woman I'd seen at the penthouse. Her posture radiated power, chin lifted with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. She dropped into the chair across from me, crossing her legs with deliberate slowness. The men around us straightened, their expressions shifting from cruel amusement to careful deference. Hello, Emma. Amanda's red lips curved into a predatory smile. Surprised to see me, I couldn't speak, my throat tight with shock. This wasn't the same woman who'd been hanging off Ethan's arm. That Amanda had seemed soft, vulnerable. This one had steel in her spine and ice in her eyes. Ethan's hand settled on Amanda's shoulder. Allow me to properly introduce Amanda Salvatore, queen of the Rossi family. His words dripped with satisfaction as he watched the color drain from my face. Your brother's biggest rival. You might also like. My mind reeled. Amanda wasn't some old flame Ethan had rekindled things with. She was a mafia queen. The head of a crime family that apparently wanted to destroy my brother. Amanda leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the armrest. Your brother's been quite the thorn in my side, if you'll excuse the pun. Her laugh echoed off the warehouse walls. But now I have his precious baby sister right where I want her. The realization hit like a physical blow. I wasn't just collateral damage in Ethan's revenge plot. I was a pawn in a much bigger game, one that had been playing out for years while I remained blissfully ignorant. My voice shook as I found my words. You used me all this time, just to get to my brother. Amanda's laugh cut through the air like broken glass. Oh honey, you really thought Ethan loved you? That's adorable. You were just convenient, the perfect way to keep tabs on Adam Thorne's movements. She pulled out her phone, her red lips curving into a cruel smile as she dialed. The speaker crackled to life. Amanda. My brother's voice. Deep, controlled, but with an edge I'd never heard before. Adam, darling. Guess who I have here with me? Amanda's fingers traced along my jaw. I jerked away. Your sweet baby sister Emma. She's grown into quite the beauty. Would be a shame if anything happened to her. If you touch her, you'll what? We both know you're not in a position to make threats. Here's the deal: surrender your territory to the Rossi family. All of it. And yourself, of course, otherwise. She pressed something cold and metallic against my temple. Well, let's just say family reunions will be rather lonely. Let me speak to her. Adam's voice was tight with barely contained rage. Adam, my voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Emma, listen to me. Everything's going to be. Amanda yanked the phone away. Tick-tock. Adam, you have 1 hour to decide your empire or your sister's life. Choose wisely. Amanda ended the call with a flick of her finger, but I could still hear Adam's desperate shouts through the speaker. My stomach churned as Ethan's face split into a smug grin. Finally, after years of playing the doting boyfriend, I'll take my place beside you in the Rossi family. He stepped toward Amanda, chest puffed out. Where Adam Thorne stands now, that'll be me. Amanda's laugh started low, then built into something sharp and cruel. Her eyes glittered with malice as she raised her hand. Boys. 2 burly men walked towards him. Before Ethan could react, they grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back. The zip tie bit into his wrists as he struggled. What, Amanda? We had a deal. A meaty fist connected with his jaw. Blood sprayed from his split lip. Another blow to his stomach doubled him over. The thugs forced him down beside me, his knees cracking against the concrete. You stupid, pathetic little man. Amanda circled him like a predator. Did you really think I'd let someone like you into my family? You were just another pawn useful for getting close to Emma, nothing more. The color drained from Ethan's face as understanding dawned. He'd been played just as thoroughly as I had. His carefully constructed plan, all those years pretending to love me, it had all been for nothing. But you promised. Blood dribbled down his chin as he spoke. I promise lots of things. Amanda waved dismissively. The difference is I never mean them. Ethan's eyes darted between Amanda and me, his split lip quivering. Emma gunshots cracked through the air, echoing off the warehouse walls. I flinched at the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood. Amanda's manicured nails dug into my shoulder as she yanked me back against her. Cold metal pressed against my temple. My heart hammered in my chest as shouts and the thunder of gunfire erupted outside. What the hell is going on? Amanda's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. The burly man in the room charged toward the door, weapons drawn. More shots rang out, followed by the distinct sounds of fists meeting flesh and bodies hitting concrete. My breath caught in my throat as footsteps approached. A familiar figure stepped through the doorway, gun raised, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he wiped it away with the back of his hand. Nolan, you might also like. Yoe held that same mocking tone that made my skin crawl. The van jerked to a stop. Rough hands grabbed my arms, dragging me across gravel. My feet stumbled, unable to find solid ground. The air shifted. We'd moved inside somewhere. They shoved me into a chair, the metal cold against my back. The blindfold came off. I blinked against the harsh light, my heart pounding as I took in my surroundings. Broken windows lined the walls of what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Through one of them, I could see nothing but dense forest stretching into darkness. The middle of nowhere. My gaze darted around the room, counting the men who surrounded me. 6, 7. Their faces were hard, weathered, eyes gleaming with something that made me want to shrink into myself. One cracked his knuckles. Another cleaned dirt from under. Let her go, Amanda. Nolan's voice carried the weight of steel. Do that, and you all get to walk out of here alive. Amanda's laugh pierced my ears as she pressed the gun harder against my temple. Oh, how noble. The guard dog thinks he can make demands. Her finger traced the trigger. Drop your weapon if you want to see your precious Emma take another breath. I watched Nolan's jaw clench. His eyes locked with mine for a moment before he slowly lowered his gun to the ground. There's a good boy. Amanda's breath tickled my ear. Now kick it over. The gun skidded across the concrete floor. Nolan's lips curved into an unexpected smile. You know, Emma, I did tell you not to sneak away from me at the mall. Should have stayed close like I asked. The gunshot cracked through the air. I screamed as blood bloomed across Nolan's shoulder, staining his white shirt crimson. But his expression didn't change. He kept smiling, as if the bullet was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Interesting. Amanda's voice held a note of curiosity. Get on your knees. Next to that waste of space. She jerked her head toward Ethan. Nolan moved with fluid grace, dropping to his knees beside Ethan's trembling form. Amanda kept one hand firmly gripped on my arm while she pulled out her phone, punching in numbers with her thumb. Send backup. Now. She barked into the receiver. Minutes stretched like hours until heavy footsteps echoed through the warehouse. 3 men in dark suits burst through the door, zip ties glinting in their hands. They converged on Nolan, roughly binding his wrists behind his back. Through it all, that smile never left his face. Amanda's grip loosened as she shoved me back into my chair. The cold metal bit into my skin as I watched her settle across from me, that cruel smile still playing on her lips. A hulking man in an expensive suit. Rossi's right hand stalked over to Nolan. His fist connected with Nolan's jaw in a sickening crack. Blood trickled from the corner of Nolan's mouth, but he just laughed. Real brave, throwing punches at a man in zip ties. Nolan spat blood onto the concrete. Bet you wouldn't be so tough if my hands were free. Shut up, both of you. Amanda's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Her eyes locked onto mine, gleaming with malicious delight. Let's play a game while we wait for Adam to grace us with his presence. My stomach twisted as she pulled out her gun again, running her fingers along the barrel almost lovingly. Choose, Emma. She gestured between Ethan and Nolan with the weapon. Pick which one gets to live. You're lying, ex-fiancé. The gun pointed at Ethan, who flinched. Or this loyal dog who's been following you around. She swung it toward Nolan, who remained perfectly still. My heart hammered against my ribs. What? It's simple really. Amanda leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. 1 bullet, 2 men. You decide who takes it. Choose carefully. You'll have to live with this decision. I looked between them. Ethan, pale and trembling, tears streaming down his face, and Nolan, still wearing that confident smile despite the blood staining his teeth. Amanda's words echoed in my head. Choose. Emma, please. Ethan's voice cracked. I know I messed up. God, I messed up so bad. But these past 7 years weren't a lie. I love you. We can start fresh, leave all this behind us. His eyes brimmed with tears. Remember our plans? The house by the lake, the garden you wanted to plant. It can still be real. Just choose me. Please, choose me and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I turned to Nolan. Blood dripped steadily from his split lip, but his eyes held that same steady warmth I'd come to know. Your choice, sweetheart. His voice was soft, gentle. Do what feels right for you. Not for me, not for him, for you. My mind flashed back to yesterday, about how Nolan had confessed his decade-long love to me. I looked between them, Ethan with his desperate pleas and promises, Nolan with his quiet strength. I choose Nolan. The words came out steady, sure. Ethan's face crumpled. Emma, no, I choose Nolan, I repeated, stronger this time. Because he's the only one who gave me a real choice. You might also like sorry. Amanda threw her head back and laughed, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. My stomach churned as she raised her gun, ignoring Ethan's desperate pleas. Emma, please, the gunshot rang out. I flinched as crimson sprayed across the concrete. Ethan's body slumped forward, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Amanda turned to me, lips curled in a predatory smile. Poor Emma. Did you really think this was a game? She swung the gun toward Nolan. That I'd actually let you choose? No. I lunged forward, but the men held me back. Nolan remained silent, those warm green eyes fixed on mine. Not a trace of fear showed on his bloodied face. Stop, the voice cut through the warehouse like a blade. My heart stopped. I knew that voice would know it anywhere, even after 9 years. Adam stood in the doorway, backlit by the dim warehouse lights, his presence commanding the entire room. I watched as Adam's presence sent ripples of unease through the room. The men shifted nervously, their grips on their weapons tightening. Amanda jumped up from her seat, her gun now trained on my brother. Well, the infamous Adam Thorne graces us with his presence. A cold smile played across Adam's lips. Amanda, still playing with guns you can barely handle. Shut up. Her hand trembled slightly. Get him. On his knees. Next to DeLuca. The men exchanged uncertain glances. Before approaching Adam, they grabbed his arms with obvious reluctance, their movements careful as they guided him down. Careful with the suit, boys, Adam said, dropping to his knees with casual grace. It's Armani. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. The men hardened criminals. By the look of them, treated him like he was made of glass. You're not so tough now, are you? Amanda's confidence seemed to grow with each step she took toward him. Adam's smile never wavered. You really should have done your homework, sweetheart. I said shut up. She pressed the gun to his temple. Emma. Adam's eyes found mine. Close your eyes. What's happening? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Adam, what? Trust me, little sister. Like you used to. Close your eyes. Amanda laughed. How sweet. A family reunion. She glanced at her men. Make sure she watches everything. The hands on my shoulders tightened. Beside Adam, Nolan remained silent, but I caught the slight nod he gave my brother. Last chance, Amanda. Adam's voice dropped dangerously low. Walk away. Amanda's laughter echoed through the warehouse, cold and bitter. Walk away. Oh no, Adam. I waited too long for this moment. She paced in front of us, her heels clicking against the concrete. You remember that night, don't you? When I offered you everything, my family's connections, my devotion, my love. Her voice cracked on the last word. But the mighty Adam Thorne was too good for me. Rejected me like I was nothing. I stared at my brother, pieces clicking into place. The way the men treated him, Amanda's vendetta. There was so much I didn't know about Adam's life. And now, Amanda's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I'm going to tear everything you built to the ground. Your empire, your family. She pressed the gun harder against his temple. Everything. Adam's smile never wavered, but something shifted in the air around him. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Even the men holding me took an instinctive step back. You know what your problem is, Amanda? His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it made my skin crawl. You always thought this was a game. That I was playing hard to get. That my rejection was part of some dance. He lifted his gaze to meet hers, and I watched Amanda's confident smile falter, but I wasn't playing. And neither am I now. The darkness in his voice made me shiver. I'm going to count to 3, and you're going to learn exactly why they call me the Mafia King. You're bluffing. But Amanda's hand shook as she gripped the gun. 1. You might also like to. I watched in awe as Adam moved with the grace of a predator as his words left his mouth. His leg swept up in a fluid arc, connecting with Amanda's wrist. The gun went flying, clattering across the concrete floor. You always did telegraph your moves, Adam said, rising to his full height. Rossi's right-hand man barreled toward my brother. But Nolan was already moving, the remnants of his zip tie falling to the ground. He stepped between them, his fist connecting with the man's jaw in a brutal uppercut. Been waiting to do that. Nolan's knuckles were bloody, but his eyes sparkled with dark satisfaction. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Bodies slammed into concrete. Fists flew. Metal scraped against metal. Emma, down. Adam's voice cut through the mayhem. Dropped just as a knife whistled past where my head had been. The man who'd won a peen holding me cursed as Adam's elbow rushed into his face. DSS cross, watch your left. I called out to Nolan as mother attacker approached. Olin spun, catching the man's arm and twisting until something cracked. Thanks, Javi Theart. Amanda scrambled for her gun, but Adams in the FAFOOT pinned her wrist to the ground. Always reaching for what isn't yours. Atween sans, you'll regret this, she spat, struggling against his hold. Hat. En Eve spalready regret not dealing with you Una. Adam's voice carried that same Androuse edge that made everyone else in the room flinch. Read into TE. Fishrossi's men charged again, but Nolan met him halfway. Their bodies collided with the force of a freight train. Nolan's fist found its mark once, twice, 3 times. Stay down, Nolan growled as the bigger man crumpled to the floor. The warehouse doors burst open, more of Rossi's men flooding in with weapons drawn. My heart hammered against my ribs as Adam moved to intercept them, his movements precise and deadly. Nolan's fingers worked quickly at my restraints. Almost got it. The zip ties snapped free. He helped me to my feet, his hands steady on my shoulders. You okay? I nodded, still processing everything happening around us. Stay close. His eyes searched mine before. He dove back into the fray, joining Adam against the new wave of attackers. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. I flinched as more followed sound echoing off the warehouse walls. Adam and Nolan drew their weapons in one fluid motion, returning fire with practiced efficiency. Get down. Adam's voice carried over the chaos. I ducked behind a concrete pillar, pressing my back against it as bullets whizzed past. The sound of bodies hitting the floor mixed with shouts and gunfire. Emma. Nolan called out. You good? I'm okay. My voice shook, but I held my ground. Keep your head down. Adam commanded between shots. Stay behind cover. Don't move from that spot, Emma. Nolan shouted, ducking behind a crate to reload. We've got this. More gunfire erupted, and I pressed myself harder against the pillar. The concrete vibrated with each impact, chips of it flying as bullets struck nearby. Emma, you still good? Adam's voice carried over the chaos. Still here. I called back, my heart racing as another spray of bullets peppered the area around me. The sounds of gunfire died down. Bodies littered the warehouse floor, some groaning, others still. My breath came in short gasps as I surveyed the carnage from behind my pillar. I think that's the last of them. Nolan called out, kicking away a gun from one of Rossi's fallen men. Movement caught my eye. Amanda. She'd crawled behind some crates during the chaos. My mouth opened to shout a warning, but the words stuck in my throat as I saw the gun in her hand, aimed straight at my chest. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. Time slowed. The warehouse air grew thick, heavy with the scent of gunpowder and blood. Emma. Adam's voice ripped through the silence. The gun went off. I saw the muzzle flash, heard the deafening crack. My body froze, refusing to move as the bullet sailed toward me. A dark shape hurtled across my vision. His body slammed into mine, spinning me away as the bullet found its mark. He grunted, his weight carrying us both to the ground. No. Nolan's anguished cry echoed off the walls. Warm liquid seeped through my shirt where Adam pressed against me. Not my blood. His. Adam. My voice cracked as I rolled him onto his back. His face had gone pale, jaw clenched against the pain. A dark stain spread across his chest, just below his shoulder. Worth it, he managed through gritted teeth. Always protect my little sister. You might also like sorry Alpha got. A single shot rang out. Amanda's body jerked back, her gun clattering to the ground as she collapsed. My eyes darted to Nolan, his weapon still trained on her fallen form, before he sprinted toward us. Boss, stay with us. Nolan dropped to his knees beside Adam, pressing his hands over the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining his sleeves crimson. The backup team's 2 minutes out. We'll get you to the hospital. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My brother lay bleeding in my arms. The warehouse spun around me as reality crashed in waves. All this time, he'd been watching over me. All this time, Emma. Adam's voice pulled me back. His face had gone ghostly pale, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. I'm sorry I stayed. Away, don't. The word came out as a sob. Just stay with me. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he turned to Nolan. His hand trembled as he gripped Nolan's shoulder. Thank you. For being the best right hand I could ask for. For all these years, save your strength. Nolan's voice cracked. The team's almost here. Just hold on. Adam's lips curved into a smile, even as more blood stained his teeth red. My brother's breath came in ragged gasps. His eyes shifted to Nolan, a knowing glint flickering through the pain. I saw it, you know. Blood bubbled at Adam's lips. The way you'd ask about those reports from Ethan. Always so concerned. About my sister. Nolan's hands pressed harder against the wound, his jaw clenched tight. A flash of something crossed his face, guilt, fear. I couldn't tell. Adam's fingers found mine, squeezing with what strength he had left. Emma, I'm so sorry. For everything. For staying away. His voice broke. I didn't know what that bastard was doing to you. If I'd known, please, I choked out. Save your strength. But he wasn't finished. His gaze locked onto Nolan one final time, determination burning in his fading eyes. Take care of her. And the Empire. It's yours now. His grip on my hand went slack. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant wail of sirens. No. My scream echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off metal walls and empty spaces. I clutched Adam's hand tighter, willing warmth back into his cold fingers. Please, no. I just found you again. Nolan's hands never stopped working, pressing against the wound even as Adam's chest stilled. His fingers moved to my brother's neck, searching for a pulse, and it wasn't there. Come on, boss. Nolan's voice cracked. Don't do this. Men in dark suits flooded the warehouse, weapons drawn. Someone pulled Amanda's body away. Others secured the perimeter. A medical team rushed toward us, equipment in hand. Clear the area. A voice commanded. Strong hands gripped my shoulders, trying to pull me back. I fought against them, refusing to let go of Adam's hand. The medical team swarmed around Adam. They cut away his shirt, attached monitors, started compressions. Each thud of their efforts drove another stake through my heart. I buried my face in Nolan's chest, unable to watch. His arms wrapped around me, steady despite the tremor I felt in his breathing. We both knew. We'd both seen the light fade from Adam's eyes. The medical team called out numbers, pushed medications, shocked his heart, but the monitor's flat line never changed. Time of death 6 months later. I stood before Adam's grave, my fingers tracing the cold marble. Fresh roses covered the ground. Nolan's steady presence beside me anchored me as memories flooded back. My knees buckled. The weight of loss crashed over me like a wave. Nolan caught me, his arms wrapping around my waist. He'd be proud of you, Nolan whispered against my hair. You're stronger than you know. Just like him. I turned in his embrace, tears streaming down my face. I miss him so much. The greatest legacies aren't built in marble. Nolan brushed away my tears with 16 dio high's thumb. They live in the hearts of those left behind. In the empire he created. In you. I lifted my face to his, seeing the same pain reflected in his eyes. The same love. The same fierce protectiveness that had drawn me to him. Our lips met in a gentle kiss. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. Let's go home, he murmured. We walked hand in hand to the black SUV waiting at the cemetery gates. As I slid into the leather seat, I caught my reflection in the tinted window. I barely recognized myself. Gone was the naive girl who'd fallen for Ethan's lies. In her place sat the queen of an empire my brother had built, with a man feared throughout the underworld by my side. I am Emma Thorne, and Nolan DeLuca is my beast. T.E. Co. Series 2. I used to believe love could conquer anything. 5 years of marriage taught me otherwise. For 5 years, I cherished every moment with Thomas, even when his eyes wandered to his phone, his fingers dancing across the screen with messages I pretended not to see. Even when he whispered Jessica in his sleep, I convinced myself it was just a nightmare. Until that Tuesday afternoon. The office had sent me home early. Budget cuts meant shorter hours. I remember the way my heels clicked against the marble floor of our bedroom hallway, how the sound echoed through the empty house. The moans drifting from behind our closed door should have stopped me. Instead, I pushed it open. There they were, tangled in the Egyptian Series 2 cotton sheets I'd picked out for our anniversary. Thomas's back arched as he thrust into her, his voice hoarse as he called out her name. Jessica. God, Jessica. My wedding ring felt like ice against my finger. The diamond Thomas had chosen. Because it reminded me of your eyes, he had said. I didn't slam the door. Didn't scream. Didn't throw things like they do in movies. I just stood there, watching my husband make love to another woman in our bed on our anniversary, with more passion than he'd ever shown me. Then I closed the door. Softly. They never even knew I was there. I walked back down that hallway, my heels still clicking against the marble. But this time, each step felt like a heartbeat, counting down the death of something I'd spent 5 years trying to keep alive. Series 2. They say when you truly love someone, you want them to be happy. Even if it's not with you. but they never tell you how much it hurts to watch them find that happiness in someone else's arms. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts while my feet carried me down our curved driveway. Past Thomas's gleaming BMW. Past the imported Japanese maple he'd planted to make the house feel more like home. I hit the call button before I could change my mind. 3 rings. Morton Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with someone about filing for divorce. Today. My voice came out steadier than I expected. 1 moment please. The autumn wind whipped around me as I paced the sidewalk, each step taking me further from the house. This is Patricia Morton. My husband is upstairs having sex with another woman in our bed. I need a divorce. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. A pause. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Are you somewhere safe? Yes, I'm outside. Good. Listen carefully, don't go back. Inside right now. Do you have somewhere you can stay? I thought of Amelia, who'd warned me about Thomas years ago, who'd seen through his charm while I'd been blinded by it. Yes, my friend's place. Perfect. I have an opening in 30 minutes. Can you make it to my office? I glanced at my watch. PM. The same Series 2 watch Thomas had given me last Christmas, claiming it was perfect for a Rivers woman. I'll be there. Patricia gave me the address. As I hung up, a text from Thomas lit up my screen. Working late tonight, don't wait up. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Even now, the lies kept coming. I opened the Uber app and typed in the law firm's address. No more pretending. No more lies. No more being the perfect Rivers wife. I pulled into our driveway at 8, the house dark except for the porch light. My hands shook less now, Patricia Morton's words echoing in my head. You're doing the right thing. The sheets had been changed. The windows opened. But the scent of her perfume lingered, something expensive, something that screamed Jessica Series 2. At 11, headlights swept across the front windows. The BMW's engine cut off. Keys jingled in the lock. Thomas stepped in, his tie loosened, suit, jacket draped over his arm. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, not from work, I knew now. He froze when he saw me. You're still up. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. God, what a day at the office. 3 back-to-back meetings, and did you have fun fucking Jessica this afternoon? My voice came out calm, steady. In our bed, color drained from his face. His jacket slipped from his arm, hitting the marble floor with a soft thud. What are you? I came home early. Around 3. I met his gaze. The sounds you two made, I never heard you moan like that with me. Cheryl, I can explain, Soren. On our anniversary, Thomas. In the bed where we used to make love. He took a step toward me, hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. Baby, please don't. The word sliced through his plea. Don't call me baby. Not when her perfume is still on your skin. You might also like. Thomas's laugh pierced through me like shards of glass. Not the warm chuckle I'd fallen in love with, but something cold and cruel that transformed his handsome features into something unrecognizable. You want the truth, Cheryl? Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with Jessica. For 3 years now. He loosened his tie further, dropping onto our leather couch. And God, it's been amazing. The way she moves, the sounds she makes, my stomach churned. 3 years. While I'd been planning dinner parties, hosting his family, trying to be the perfect wife he'd been with her. I pulled the manila envelope from my purse and tossed it onto his lap. Sign these. He thumbed through the divorce papers, that twisted smile never leaving his face. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, he leaned forward, eyes glinting. I'll sign these when you tell my family you cheated on me. The room spun. You want me to lie? Think about it, everyone knows how devoted you are to me. If I'm the cheater, they'll never accept Jessica. But if you're the unfaithful one, he shrugged. I'm just the wronged husband who found comfort in an old friend's arms. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. You're insane. No, I'm practical. You want out? Fine. But it'll be on my terms. He stood, straightening his clothes. Think it over. Though really, what choice do you have? I sank into the chair across from him, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Keep the money, Thomas. All of it. I don't want a penny. His eyebrows shot up. Really now? But I won't say I cheated. I met his gaze steadily. We'll cite irreconcilable differences. Thomas drummed his fingers on the armrest, studying me. The same calculating look he'd give business competitors before crushing them. You're giving up quite a lot here. Half of everything I own, half of everything we built, I corrected. But I'd rather leave with nothing than destroy my reputation for your convenience. He leaned back, a smirk playing at his lips. Tell you what, I'll still give you something. A parting gift. His voice dripped with condescension. If you ask nicely, get down on your knees and beg, like the good little wife you've always been. The laugh that burst from my throat surprised us both. You really don't get it, do you? I stood, gathering my purse. You're not worth begging for. Not anymore. His face darkened. Cheryl, sign the papers, Thomas. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. I walked to the door, my steps lighter than they'd been in years. You can keep your money, your house, and your precious Jessica. I'm done. I stumbled into the red door bar, Amelia's arm linked through mine. The world spun, but at least the burning in my chest had dulled to a manageable ache. Another, I slurred, pushing my empty glass across the bar top. Amelia frowned. Maybe we should slow, please. I need this. My voice cracked. The bartender slid over another whiskey. Needs not worth destroying your liver over, Amelia said, but she didn't stop me as I drained half the glass. 5 years, A.M. 5 fucking years. I gave him everything. The alcohol loosened my tongue, unleashing words I'd bottled up for so long. And the whole time he was fucking her. In our bed. While I planned dinner parties for his family. Amelia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face falling. Shit, it's the hospital. She worked as an ER nurse. Cheryl, I'm so sorry, but go. I waved her off. Save lives. I'll be fine. Promise you'll call a cab. I nodded, already signaling for another drink. Amelia squeezed my shoulder and hurried out. The bar stool next to me scraped against the floor. A man settled into it, his presence somehow filling the space without being intrusive. Rough night. His voice was deep, gentle. I turned, meeting dark eyes that held no judgment. Just understanding. You could say that. Want to talk about it? Not really. I studied him through the pleasant haze of alcohol. Strong jaw, kind face. A small scar above his eyebrow caught the dim light. Fair enough. He ordered 2 waters, sliding one to me. But maybe switch to this for a bit. I laughed despite myself. Are you always this concerned about drunk strangers? Only the ones who look like they could use a friend. I don't even have a place to go tonight, I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I have a spare room. He held up his hands at my look. No strings. Just a safe place to crash. I should have said no. Should have called that cab Amelia mentioned. But little did I know what I was getting myself into. My head throbbed as I blinked away sleep. Silk sheets whispered against my skin, and I froze. This wasn't my bed. The room swam into focus, all dark wood and muted lighting. A figure sat in a leather armchair across from me. Not the kind man from the bar. Sleep well. His voice carried an edge of authority that made my spine straighten. I clutched the sheets tighter. Where am I? Who? Vincent Moretti. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Marco brought you here last night. Said you needed a safe place. The bar came rushing back, the gentle stranger who'd offered me water and a room. Marco. My right hand. Vincent's blue eyes pinned me in place. He has good instincts about people, though he usually doesn't bring strays home. I'm not a stray. I moved to get up, then realized I still wore my clothes from last night. Thank God for small mercies. No, running from something then? That's none of your business. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Thank you for the hospitality, but I should go. Where? One word, but it stopped me cold. Marco mentioned you had nowhere to stay. Heat crept up my neck. I'll figure something out. Stay. He stood, and the room seemed to shrink around his presence. At least until you get your bearings. There's plenty of space. I don't even know you. True. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But you trusted Marco enough to come here. Trust me enough to let you stay. Something in his tone made me pause. This wasn't just courtesy, it was an order wrapped in velvet. Why? Let's say I have a soft spot for people starting over. He moved toward the door. Think about it. Breakfast is downstairs. When you're ready. I made my way down the curved staircase, my fingers trailing along the polished mahogany banister. The mansion stretched before me, a maze of opulent hallways and towering windows. The scent of coffee and bacon drew me toward what had to be the dining room. My breath caught as I entered. The space opened into a grand room with a table that could seat 20. Marco's familiar face broke into a warm smile. Good morning. Around the table sat at least 8 men in sharp suits, their shoulders rigid with an unmistakable air of danger. One of them, sporting a nasty scar across his cheek, gestured to an empty chair. My hands trembled as I lowered myself into the seat. These weren't businessmen. Everything from their posture to their concealed bulges under their jackets screamed mafia. Boss incoming, someone muttered. The atmosphere shifted as Vincent entered. Every man shot to their feet, a synchronized display of respect that made my stomach clench. He moved with fluid grace, commanding attention without effort. Marco pulled out the chair at the head of the table. Vincent settled in, and Marco took his place at his right hand. Please eat. Vincent's voice carried across the table. I stared at my plate, feeling like a mouse that had wandered into a den of cats. I pushed the eggs around my plate, too nervous to eat, when I felt his gaze lock onto me. Vincent's confidence radiated across the table, making my skin prickle. A man in a tailored suit bent down and whispered in Vincent's ear. The sound that followed sent chills down my spine, a deep, rumbling laugh that filled the room. I finally found you, Cheryl Swanson. My fork clattered against the china. What did you call me? Swanson. Your maiden name. His blue eyes glittered with amusement. That's impossible. I don't know my birth name. I was adopted by the Rivers after my parents died in a car crash. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Is that what they told you? My hands began to shake. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know everything about the people under my roof. He took a slow sip of coffee. But you're special. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because, Cheryl Swanson, your parents didn't die in a car crash. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. What are you talking about? The Rivers family, they've been lying to you. About everything. No. I shook my head. They took me in, they bought you. Vincent's voice turned hard. Like property. To be Thomas' perfect little wife. It doesn't matter anymore. Vincent waved his hand. What matters is I found you. My chair scraped against the marble floor as I stood. Like hell, it doesn't matter. You can't drop something like that and expect me to just accept it. Sit down, Cheryl. No. Tell me what you know about my parents. The real story. Vincent's jaw tightened. His presence filled the room, suffocating in its intensity. This isn't the time. When is the time then? You brought it up. My voice rose, hands planted on the table. 5 years of being the perfect, quiet wife had shattered. If you know something, I said, shut your mouth, woman. A gravelly voice cut through the tension. I whipped my head toward the sound. One of the men, red-faced and sneering, had half risen from his chair. The gunshot cracked through the air before I could blink. The man's body slumped forward, blood pooling on the pristine tablecloth. A neat hole marked the center of his forehead, his eyes frozen wide in surprise. Vincent lowered his arm, the gun still smoking. His expression hadn't changed, as casual, as if he'd just taken another sip of coffee. Clean this up, he ordered, tucking the weapon back into his jacket. My legs gave out and I collapsed into my chair. The other men moved with practiced efficiency, dragging the body away while others began removing the bloodied tablecloth. Marco appeared at my side, pressing a glass of water into my trembling hands. Drink. I couldn't tear my eyes from the crimson stains spreading across the marble floor. You just, he interrupted you. Vincent's voice carried across the table, matter of fact. That was rude. You might also like sorry Alpha, I got over you. I couldn't move, my body frozen as Marco's hand pressed gently on my shoulder, guiding me back into my seat. Vincent's smile stretched across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll have to excuse the mess. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, as casual as if we'd witnessed nothing more than a spilled drink. I don't tolerate disrespect. My throat closed up. I forced my eyes away from the blood still seeping into the grout between marble tiles. Would I be next? The thought hammered in my skull. One wrong word, your face is white as snow. Vincent's voice cut through my spiral of panic. You think I'd hurt you? I couldn't answer. Couldn't force words past the knot in my throat. Marco's presence at my side was solid, steady. Boss wouldn't harm a hair on your head. Vincent leaned forward, those predator eyes fixed on me. You're safe here, Cheryl. Safer than you've ever been with the Rivers. The way he said their name made me flinch. I watched Vincent rise from his chair. My heart still hammered against my ribs, but the initial terror had faded to a dull throb of anxiety. Marco. Vincent's voice carried authority without raising above a conversational tone. Make sure everything's taken care of downstairs. Marco nodded, his solid presence leaving my side. The loss of his steadying energy made me grip my glass tighter. Vincent paused at the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Get her set-led in the luxury suite. Whatever she needs. He didn't look back as he issued the command, but several maids materialized as if conjured by his words. A gentle hand touched my arm. I looked up to find a woman with kind eyes and graying temples. Miss, if you'll follow me. I rose on shaky legs. 2 other maids fell in step behind us as we left the dining room, their footsteps whisper quiet on the polished floors. The halls stretched endlessly, each turn revealing more opulent decor. We climbed a curved staircase, the banister cool beneath my palm. Here we are. The older maid opened double doors into a suite that stole my breath. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights, while a massive four-poster bed dominated one wall. The bathroom's through there. We'll draw you a bath if you'd like, I nodded, not trusting my voice. The younger maids disappeared into the bathroom, and soon the sound of running water filled the space. Fresh clothes in the closet. She gestured to a walk-in larger than my old bedroom. Anything else you need, just press this button. She indicated a discreet panel by the bed. The maids moved around me with practiced efficiency, turning down covers, adjusting temperature controls, laying out soft towels and robes. I got in the shower and let the scalding water wash over me, as if it could cleanse the memory of blood and death from my mind. My skin turned pink, but I stayed under the spray until the water ran cold. The bed swallowed me in softness. Sleep came faster than I expected, my exhausted body giving in to darkness. Light filtering through gauzy curtains woke him. For a moment, I forgot where I was until my eyes landed on Vincent. He lounged in the same chair from earlier, smoke curling from the cigar between his fingers. The ember glowed in the dim room. My heart leaped into my throat. I shot up, clutching the silk sheets to my chest. The movement made my head spin. Vincent crushed out his cigar in a crystal ashtray. Sleep well. His voice carried that same casual tone from dinner, as if watching women sleep was perfectly normal. I pressed myself against the headboard, trying to put distance between us. My mouth went dry. Don't be scared. He stayed in his chair, hands visible on the armrests. I won't hurt you. The words should have been comforting, but coming from a man I'd watched killing someone hours ago, they felt hollow. I couldn't stop staring at those hands relaxed, but I remembered how they'd looked gripping that gun. You're safe here, he continued, those ice blue eyes fixed on me. No one will touch you. You might also like. I gathered what little courage I had left. Why are you protecting me? Vincent rose from his chair and walked towards me, each step toward the bed deliberate and measured. I pressed myself further against the headboard, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. His deep laugh filled the room. Look at you, trembling like a frightened bird. He towered over me, close enough that I caught the scent of expensive cologne and cigar smoke. But there's steel in you, isn't there? Asking questions even when you're terrified. I clutched the sheets tighter, my knuckles white against the silk. Vincent reached past me, pulling open a drawer in the bedside table. The movement brought him inches from my face, and I held my breath. He withdrew a small velvet box, dark as midnight. My confusion must have shown on my face because his lips curved into that dangerous smile again. Simple, really. He opened the box with a soft click. Inside, 4 diamond rings caught the dim light, throwing rainbows across the walls. Each stone was larger than any I'd ever seen, set in intricate bands that spoke of old wealth and power. Marry me. Take 1 ring, or all of them, I don't care which. But become my wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the rings, then at him, my mind refusing to process what he'd just said. After everything I'd seen, after the horror of the evening before, he wanted marriage. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. I don't understand. His eyes locked onto mine, that intense blue gaze holding me captive. Don't you? A beautiful woman like you deserves better than being cast aside by a fool who couldn't see your worth. I don't understand, I repeated, my voice steadier this time. Why would someone like you want to marry me? Vincent's deep laugh echoed through the room. The sound sent shivers down my spine, but not entirely from fear. A promise, dear Cheryl. One I intend to keep. He snapped the velvet box shut but kept it extended toward me. My mind raced. Everything I knew about the mafia came from movies and news reports, but one thing stood out: they lived by a code. Honor among thieves. A promise was binding, which meant I straightened my spine, finding strength in this realization. No. His eyebrows rose slightly. No, I won't marry you. The words came out clearer than I expected. Whatever promise you made, I'm not part of it. I didn't agree to anything. Vincent studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The velvet box disappeared into his pocket. You're not afraid I'll hurt you for refusing? You said I was safe here, that no one would touch me. I met his gaze. If you're a man of your word, that includes you. Another laugh, but this one held genuine amusement. Clever girl, using my own principles against me. He leaned closer, and I caught that mix of cologne and cigar again. But what makes you think I'll let you leave? You said I was safe. Being held prisoner isn't safe. Safe from harm doesn't mean free to go. His smile showed teeth. Try again, little bird. What do you want? My voice came out barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the room, it felt like a show. This blue eyes locked onto mine, holding me captive without a single touch. I told you what I want. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I want to marry you. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Why? Because you're perfect for what I need. He reached out, one finger tracing the air near my cheek without making contact. And I'll do anything to hear you say yes. The confidence in his voice, the absolute certainty, it sparked something in me. I had nothing to lose anyways. Anything. The word slipped out before I could stop it, soft and dangerous. His lips curved into a smile that promised both pleasure and pain. Anything. I took a steadying breath, trying to organize my scattered thoughts. Back in the dining room, you called me Cheryl Swanson. And you mentioned my parents. Vincent's expression shifted, a calculating look crossing his features. What about them? You know something. My hands twisted in my lap. About my adoption, about who I really am. The Rivers family told me my birth parents died in a car crash, but I never said they were alive. His voice cut through my words like a knife. Only that they didn't die in a car crash. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. What do you mean? How do you know this? Vincent stood, crossing to a wooden cabinet near the window. The Rivers family fed you many lies, Cheryl. The car crash story was just one of them. Then what really happened to them? My voice cracked. He turned back to me, something dark passing behind those blue eyes. Are you sure you want to know? Some truths can't be unknown once they're revealed. I've spent my whole life not knowing who I really am. I stood up, squaring my shoulders. I deserve the truth. Deserve? A harsh laugh escaped him. Life isn't about what we deserve, little bird. It's about what we're willing to fight for. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. How badly do you want these answers? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I thought of Thomas, of the Rivers family, of all the lies I'd swallowed over the years. Something inside me hardened. Tell me everything. Vincent's lips curved into that dangerous smile again. Everything comes with a price. The marriage proposal? I asked, connecting the dots. He inclined his head slightly. Smart girl. My heart pounded against my ribs as I forced the words out. Yes, I'll marry you, but only if you tell me everything right now. Vincent's laugh filled the room, deep and rich. He settled back in his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. Bold move, demanding terms before accepting my proposal. I need to know. My fingers twisted in my lap. Please. Your parents. He paused, watching my reaction. They sold you to the Rivers family. $25,000. That's what your childhood was worth to them. The room spun. I gripped the armrests of my chair to steady myself. They sold me. They wanted quick cash, an easy life. The Rivers had connections, money, influence. It was a simple transaction for them. His voice held no sympathy, just cold facts. Bile rose in my throat. But why would the Rivers want? Because of who you really are. Vincent leaned forward. Your grandfather was Dominic Swanson. The name means nothing to you, I'm sure, but to people like me. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He was legendary. My teacher, my mentor. Until I surpassed even him. Grandfather. The word felt foreign on my tongue. The mighty Dominic Swanson's blood runs through your veins. The Rivers knew exactly what they were buying, a connection to power they could never earn on their own. Vincent's eyes gleamed. They just never expected me to come collecting what's mine. My head spun with questions, each revelation hitting harder than the last. The family I'd thought abandoned me had instead sold me. The grandfather I never knew existed was some sort of criminal legend. And now his former student sat before me, demanding marriage. Did my grandfather know? My voice cracked. About me being sold. Vincent's laugh sent ice through my veins. Not amusement, this was darker, deadlier. Your grandfather was furious when he found out. Called it an unforgivable betrayal of blood. Vincent's eyes locked onto mine. He gave me my first real assignment, that day: secure his granddaughter and eliminate the threat. My stomach lurched. The threat? Your parents. He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. I put 2 bullets in your father's chest while he begged for mercy. Your mother tried to run. A cruel smile played at his lips. She didn't get far. I gripped the chair arms until my knuckles went white, trying to anchor myself to something solid as my world crumbled. You. The word came out as barely a whisper. You killed them. I did what needed to be done. Vincent leaned forward. But by the time I tracked you down, the Rivers had already hidden you away. Your grandfather died before I could return you to him. Bile rose in my throat. This man, sitting so calmly before me, had murdered my parents in cold blood. The same man now wanted to marry me. Why? Tell me this. I managed to choke out. Because you asked for everything. Vincent's voice held no remorse. And I always keep my promises. Your grandfather's last words to me were, bring her home. Vincent's voice dropped lower, his fingers drumming against the armrest. I failed him. The only time I've ever failed anyone. My throat felt raw. And now I'll take you to him. Not the way he wanted, but he stood towering over me. At least I can bring his blood back to where it belongs. His grave, I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. Smart girl. The corner of his mouth twitched. The rivers kept you well hidden. Changed your name, erased every trace. But blood. He shook his head. Blood always finds its way home. I don't understand. Why now, after all these years? Because now you're free. Vincent's eyes gleamed. No more rivers, no more pretending to be something you're not. You're Dominic Swanson's granddaughter, his legacy. Legacy? I laughed, the sound brittle. I didn't even know he existed until 5 minutes ago. But you felt it, didn't you? That you never belonged with them. That something was missing. His words hit too close. All those years of feeling like an outsider, of trying to earn love from people who saw me as property. Take me to him, I heard myself say. Vincent's eyebrows rose. Just like that. You killed my parents. My voice didn't shake. You want to marry me. The least you can do is show me where I came from. Careful what you wish for, little bird. Once you see who you really are, I already know who I am. I met his gaze. What I don't know is who I could have been. Vincent's fingers wrapped around my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. The warmth of his hand sent an unwanted shiver down my spine. He pulled me from the room and held my wrist till we reached outside. The evening air hit my face as we stepped outside. A black SUV waited, its engine purring. Vincent opened the passenger door, his other hand never leaving my wrist, until I slid inside. The leather seats creaked as he settled behind the wheel. His hand found my thigh, it was heavy and possessive. I stared straight ahead, fighting the urge to brush it away. Comfortable. His thumb traced small circles on my leg. I kept my silence, watching unfamiliar streets blur past. We left the city behind and buildings gave way to empty stretches of road. The car turned onto a dirt path, gravel crunching under the tires. An old shed emerged from the growing darkness. Vincent killed the engine but left his hand on my thigh. We're here, the shed loomed before us. Vincent's grip on my wrist guided me through the shed's entrance. A single bulb cast long shadows across weathered walls. At the far end, a massive leather chair commanded attention. It was more of a throne than furniture. The portrait beside it stopped my breath. The man's face was all hard angles and determination, his eyes boring into me even from canvas. Vincent's laugh bounced off the walls. Here she is, Dominic. Your granddaughter, finally home, that's him. My voice came out smaller than intended. The most feared man in the country. Until the rivers took everything from him, including you. I stepped closer to the portrait, drawn to those familiar eyes. He has my eyes. Your mother's too. Before Vincent cut himself off. Before what? Before you killed her. The words tasted like acid. Yes. Vincent's voice carried no hesitation. Before I killed them. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the portrait frame to steady myself. Your grandfather gave them everything they wanted. Half his territory, connections, protection. Vincent's hand left my wrist. All to keep you safe, to give Dio a chance at knowing your real family. I traced the stern lines of my grandfather's face. What happened? The rivers took his offering and stabbed him in the back. Changed your name, moved you across state lines, buried every trace of your existence. Vincent's jaw clenched. By the time we found you, the cancer had spread through his lungs. My fingers dropped from the portrait. He fought it. Vincent's voice softened. Fought death itself, trying to hold on long enough to see you. His last words, he paused, something raw flickering across his face. He made me swear to bring you back. To protect you. Keep you safe until my last breath. And marrying me accomplishes that. How? Because a wife, Vincent stepped closer, is untouchable in our world. No one would dare harm you as long as you're mine. You mean, as long as I'm your property? No. His hand cupped my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. As long as you're under my protection. The choice is yours, Cheryl. But know this, I made a promise to a dying man. Whether you accept me or not, I will keep that promise. The weight of generations of secrets pressed down on me. My whole life had been built on lies, carefully constructed by the family I thought had saved me. But they'd been my jailers all along. He loved you. Vincent's thumb brushed my cheek. More than his empire, more than his life. Everything he did was to give you back your birthright. My hands trembled as Vincent's words sank in. The Rivers family, the people I'd bowed and scraped to for years, the ones I'd thought rescued me from a life of poverty. They'd stolen everything from me. My real family. My inheritance. My identity. They knew. My voice cracked. All this time, they knew who I was. Your adoption wasn't charity, Cheryl. It was calculated. They wanted Dominic Swanson's fortune, and you were their ticket. Those manipulative bastards. I paced the shed, memories flooding back with cruel clarity. The way they'd parade me at parties like some rescued stray. How Thomas's mother would remind me daily of their generosity in taking me in. My chest heaved as years of suppressed anger burst free. They made me feel worthless, Vincent. Made me think I should be grateful for a loveless marriage, for being treated like dirt. I whirled to face him, and all along, they were the ones who took everything from me. Your grandfather searched for you until his last breath. Vincent's voice was soft, but his eyes blazed with shared fury. The rivers covered their tracks while I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs unable to hold me. Tell me about him, please. What was he like? He was a force of nature. Tough as nails in business, but he'd have moved heaven and earth for you. When you disappeared, Vincent's jaw clenched. It broke him. You might also like sorry Alpha, I got over you, a sorry Alpha. I got over you, Wolfbane, mistaken groom, rejecting the cold Alpha, mistaken groom, night glow, rejecting the cold Alpha. See, fresh tears spilled down my cheeks, but these weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of rage, of mourning for the grandfather I'd never known, for the life that had been stolen from me. Vincent's fingers traced the outline of an old photo he pulled from his jacket, me as a baby, cradled in my grandfather's arms. My heart ached at the sight. I'll do the same for you, Cheryl. Move heaven and earth. Vincent's voice dropped low, dangerous. The rivers took everything from you. Let me help you take it back. I wrapped my arms around myself, the musty air of the shed pressing in. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls. Why would you do that for me? Because you deserve justice. He crossed space between us, his presence filling the small shed. Let me make you mine, and together we'll destroy them. Every last one who hurt you. My breath caught. The raw intensity in his eyes made my pulse race. This dangerous man wanted to avenge me, to tear down the family that had imprisoned me in a cage of false gratitude and manipulation. The rivers, I swallowed hard. They have connections, money, influence. Vincent's laugh was dark velvet. And I have more. They won't see us coming until it's too late. Us? The word felt foreign on my tongue. Yes, us. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Say yes, Cheryl. Let me show you what real protection feels like. What real devotion looks like. The warmth of his touch sent electricity through my skin. Here in this broken down shed, with dust motes dancing in moonbeams, a man who commanded empires was offering me everything I'd been denied: power, revenge, belonging. I could destroy them. My voice came out barely above a whisper. We could reduce them to nothing. Make them feel every ounce of pain they caused you. Yes. The word escaped my lips, carrying years of pent-up pain and longing. Vincent's eyes darkened. He pulled me close, one hand tangling in my hair while the other traced the curve of my spine. His lips crashed into mine with an intensity that stole my breath. The kiss was raw, desperate, everything my marriage had lacked. Where Thomas's touches had been cold obligation, Vincent's burned with promise and protection. He broke away, leaving me gasping. Without a word, he grabbed my wrist and handled me from the shed. His grip was firm but gentle, anchoring me as we moved through the darkness. The night air kissed my flushed skin. Leaves crunched beneath our feet as we wound through overgrown paths. For the first time in years, I felt safe, protected. The man leading me through the shadows was dangerous, but his danger wasn't meant for me. We emerged into a small clearing. Moonlight spilled across a solitary headstone, nearly obscured by weeds and vines. Vincent's thumb stroked my wrist as we approached. Dominic Swanson, I whispered, reading the weathered inscription. My fingers traced the carved letters, connecting me to the grandfather I'd never known. The date of death hit me hard, just 2 years ago. While I'd been trapped in my loveless marriage, he'd been searching for me. I pulled my hand away from the headstone, my grandfather's name etched not just in stone, but now in my heart. The rage that had been building inside me crystallized into something sharp. No more tears. No more weakness. Vincent. My voice came out steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. Take me home, to your place. His eyes locked with mine, searching. A slow smile spread across his face, dangerous and possessive. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. Say it again. His thumb traced my jawline. Take me home. I leaned into his touch, unflinching. I want to go home with you. There's my woman. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, then pulled back to look at me. Ready to leave this all behind. Your woman, I repeated softly, testing how the words felt on my tongue. They didn't feel like the cage my marriage had been. They felt like freedom. Vincent swept me into his arms without warning, cradling me against his chest. My fingers curled into his shirt, breathing in his scent of leather and spice. He carried me through the moonlit shed, past weathered tools and dusty memories. "Goodbye, Grandpa," I whispered, looking back at the small building that held so many answers. "I'll make them pay for keeping us apart." The black SUV waited in the shadows, engine purring. Vincent settled me in the passenger seat, his hands lingering longer than necessary. The drive back was silent. We pulled up to the sprawling mansion, security gates sliding shut behind us. Vincent helped me out, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew lay beneath. He led me up marble stairs. "This is your room." He pushed open a door, revealing a luxurious suite in deep blues and silvers. "Mine's right next door if you need anything." I stepped inside, running my fingers over silk curtains. "You're not staying. You've been through enough tonight. Get some rest." His eyes softened as they met mine. "I want you to feel safe here, Cheryl. No one will force anything on you again." The words struck deep. After years of Thomas's entitled demands, Vincent's respect felt like a gift I'd forgotten I deserved. He waited in the doorway until I nodded. "Thank you," I said softly. "Sweet dreams, little bird." He closed the door with a quiet click. I sank onto the plush bed, still processing how my life had shifted so dramatically. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, Thomas's name lighting up the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail but steeled myself and answered. "Hello, Cheryl." His voice dripped with that familiar smugness. "Just making sure you remember our appointment tomorrow. 10 a.m. sharp at the lawyer's office." "I remember." I kept my voice steady, fingers tracing patterns on the silk sheets. "Good, good. The whole Rivers clan will be there to witness our separation." He chuckled. "You should bring your family too." "Oh wait," he paused for dramatic effect. "That's right, you don't have any family to bring, do you?" The old wound stung, but I refused to let him hear it in my voice. 5 years of practice had taught me how to swallow pain. Vincent's face flashed in my mind, those ice blue eyes that promised protection. "Actually, Thomas, I will be bringing family." "What?" The smug tone faltered. "You heard me. See you tomorrow at 10. I hung up before he could respond, satisfaction coursing through me at having knocked him off balance. I stepped out of the black SUV, my heels clicking against the pavement. Thomas and his family clustered near the law office entrance, Jessica hanging off his arm like a trophy. Their faces twisted in confusion. Marco opened my door. Thomas's mouth dropped open, then curved into that cruel smirk I'd grown to hate. Well, looks like someone's putting on quite a show." I walked past them, head high. Marco's solid presence followed a few steps behind, exactly where he needed to be. "Must have cost you a month's salary to rent that fancy car and hire muscle." Thomas' voice carried across the parking lot. "Or maybe he gave Marco a pointed once over. You found other ways to pay for it. Always knew you were desperate, but this is a new low." Jessica tittered behind her perfectly manicured hand. The Rivers family exchanged knowing looks, already believing the worst. Marco surged forward, his face dark with rage. "You piece of—" I raised my hand. "Marco, stop." He froze mid-step, muscles coiled tight. "One word, madam. Just say it, and I'll end him right here." "No." I met Thomas's now uncertain gaze. "Not yet. Let's skip the drama and sign the papers." I gestured toward the office doors. "Unless you need an audience for this too." Thomas's jaw clenched. His parents shifted behind him, their designer clothes rustling with disapproval. "You might also like—" "Look at her," my mother-in-law Margaret hissed. "Acting high and mighty now that she's found herself a new sponsor." Her lips curled around the word. "Always knew she was common trash," my father-in-law Robert muttered. "Should have listened to my instincts years ago." I kept my expression neutral, remembering Vincent's words from last night. Their barbs couldn't touch me anymore. "Inside. Now." I held the door open, my voice steady. Thomas hesitated, his grip tightening on Jessica's waist. "What's wrong, Thomas?" I raised an eyebrow. "Worried about facing me without your cheerleaders?" Jessica's perfectly painted lips parted in outrage. "How dare you?" "The papers," I cut her off. "That's all I'm here for." I walked into the office, Marco's footsteps echoing behind me. Let them whisper. Let them scheme. They had no idea what was coming, how their carefully constructed world of privilege would crumble. Vincent's resources would make sure of that. But for now, I simply needed Thomas's signature. The rest would follow in time. I watched Thomas scrawl his signature. Across the papers, his usual arrogant smirk playing at his lips. My own signature followed, steady and clear. 5 years of marriage erased in moments. "Well, that's done." Thomas straightened, adjusting his tie. "But wait, there's more." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out another set of documents, pristine and crisp. Jessica preened beside him. Since we're all here, Thomas's eyes gleamed with malice. Might as well make it official. Jessica and I are getting married. Right now. Margaret Rivers clapped her hands together. Oh, how wonderful. Finally, a proper wife for our Thomas. See, Cheryl. Thomas waved the marriage license. This is what real love looks like. Not that pathetic devotion you showed for years. The words struck deep, but I kept my face blank. 5 years of practice had taught me well. How does it feel? Jessica purred. Watching the man you love choose someone else. Before I could respond, the office door swung open. It was Vincent. He filled the doorframe, his presence commanding instant attention. He strode toward me, ice blue eyes locked on mine. Perfect timing. Vincent's voice carried across the room. I was hoping to do this here. He pulled me close, one arm sliding around my waist. Two can play this game, Vincent murmured against my ear, then captured my lips in a searing kiss. The Rivers family fell silent, their laughter dying in their throats. Vincent's fingers wrapped around my wrist, firm but gentle. The contrast between his touch and Thomas's rough grabs over the years made my breath catch. Marriage isn't a game. Vincent's voice cut through the stunned silence. And it sure as hell isn't something to be done in some dingy office to prove a point. Thomas took a half step back, his earlier bravado crumbling under Vincent's steel gaze. Jessica clutched his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Who do you think? Margaret Rivers started, but Vincent's cold laugh silenced her. Who am I? Vincent's thumb traced circles on my wrist. Someone who knows the difference between real power and playing dress-up. His eyes swept over their designer clothes and borrowed confidence. When I marry Cheryl, it'll be with the respect she deserves. Not this circus act. I felt the shift in the room, saw it in the way Robert Rivers' shoulders hunched, how Jessica's spray-tan complexion paled, how Thomas couldn't meet Vincent's eyes. They had no idea who he was, but something primal in them recognized the predator in their midst. Come. Vincent guided me toward the door. We have better places to be. I caught a glimpse of Thomas's face as we passed, the dawning realization that his little power play had backfired spectacularly. For the first time in 5 years, I saw fear in his eyes. Marco held the door, and I stepped out into the sunlight, my head high. Vincent's presence beside me felt like armor. The Rivers family huddled together, watching us through the office window. Their world of country club memberships and social climbing seemed small now, pathetic even. I hadn't asked for any of this, the mafia boss, the promises. But standing there, watching my ex-husband and his family cower before Vincent's raw power, I felt something I hadn't in years. Pride. Thomas's voice carried across the parking lot, the familiar entitled tone that used to make me shrink. Don't forget who signs your paychecks, Cheryl. I expect you in my office first thing. I felt Vincent tense beside me, but his face remained a mask of calm. His thumb hadn't stopped its gentle circles on my wrist. Jessica's shrill laugh pierced the air. See, she's still dependent on us. This little show won't change anything. I turned to Vincent, and something passed between us, an understanding, a shared secret. His lips curved into a smile that held promises of chaos, and I found myself mirroring it. You're right, Thomas. I kept my voice sweet, the way I used to speak when playing the dutiful wife. I'll see you at the office. Thomas's triumphant expression made my stomach turn. He wrapped his arm around Jessica's waist, already celebrating his victory. And those bodyguards better apologize too, he called out, puffing up his chest. Can't have the help disrespecting management. Vincent's quiet chuckle beside me sent shivers down Thomas's spine. I could see it in the way he stiffened, in how his grip on Jessica tightened. Of course, I said, letting Vincent guide me to his car where Marco waited. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly where they stand. I settled into the leather seat of Vincent's car, my heart still racing from the confrontation. Marco pulled away from the curb, leaving the Rivers and their small-minded world behind. I apologize for not being there earlier. Vincent's voice filled the quiet space. But I received some news that couldn't wait. I turned to face him. What news? Your grandfather's will. He pulled out an envelope from his jacket. The original one, not the fabricated version the Rivers presented. My fingers trembled as I took it. How did you? Dominic was thorough. He kept multiple copies, buried in places only those closest to him knew about. Vincent's eyes held mine. You're the sole heir, Cheryl. Every property, every asset he owned, it's yours. But the Rivers stole what was rightfully yours. Used their lawyers to manipulate documents while you were grieving. His jaw tightened. But we'll get it all back. All of it, every last piece. He leaned back, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The warehouses by the pier, the summer house in Hampton, the art collection, everything they thought they could keep. Thomas knew. The realization hit me like a punch. That's why he married you. Yes. Vincent's hand found mine. but he underestimated Dominic. And you. I stared at the will in my lap, remembering my grandfather's weathered face, his quiet strength. He tried to protect me. He did more than that. He made sure you'd have the power to fight back. Vincent squeezed my hand. And now you do. Marco caught my eye in the rearview mirror, a slight nod of approval in his expression. Where are we going? I asked. Home, Vincent said. We have plans. Toy walked into the Rivers Company building, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Vincent and Marco flanked me. Thomas sat behind his father's mahogany desk, Jessica perched on its edge like she belonged there. Margaret and Robert Rivers stood nearby, their faces painted with that familiar condescending smile. Ah, finally. Thomas leaned back in his chair, ready to apologize. Your bodyguards too. I approached his desk, my lips curved in a smile that made his own falter. Without warning, my palm connected with his cheek, the crack echoing through the room. His head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming where I'd struck him. How dare! Margaret stepped forward, but Vincent's quiet chuckle from the couch stopped her cold. You know what's funny? I traced my fingers along the desk's edge. For years, I wondered why you chose me. The adopted country girl who wasn't good enough for your precious son. Jessica's smug expression wavered as Thomas rubbed his cheek, fury building in his eyes. But now I know. I pulled out the original will from my bag. You needed me because I'm Dominic Swanson's granddaughter. The real owner of everything you stole while I was grieving. Robert Rivers' face drained of color. That's impossible. The warehouses, the Hampton house, the art collection. I met Thomas's gaze. Everything you married me for. It was never yours to take. Thomas lunged forward, but Marco's hand on his shoulder pushed him back into his chair. What's wrong, Thomas? I tilted my head. Isn't this what you wanted? To see me in your office? I watched Thomas fumble for his phone, his hands shaking with rage. You'll regret this. One call and my connections in the mafia will. Vincent's deep laugh cut through the tension. My skin prickled at the sound. Marco. Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. Let him go. Marco released his grip on Thomas's shoulder and stepped back. Thomas straightened his jacket, trying to reclaim some dignity. Go ahead, Vincent said, patting the space beside him on the couch. Make your call. I moved across the room and settled next to Vincent, our shoulders brushing. The leather creaked under my weight. You think I'm bluffing? Thomas's voice cracked as he jabbed at his phone screen. I know people. Important people. Jessica edged away from the desk, her earlier confidence evaporating. Margaret gripped Robert's arm, their faces pale as sheets. By all means. Vincent's arm draped across the back of the couch behind me. Call your mafia friends. I'd love to meet them. Thomas's fingers flew across his phone screen, a smirk playing on his lips. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Last chance to walk away. I kept my face blank as Vincent's fingers wove through my hair, his touch gentle despite the tension crackling through the room. Look at her acting tough. Margaret's lip curled. Just like when we bought you from those pathetic parents of yours. Couldn't even afford to keep their own child. Robert chuckled. Remember how that old fool of a grandfather came charging in? All that fuss about taking you back. Lost his life to cancer, haha. My hands clenched in my lap, but Vincent's steady strokes through my hair kept me grounded. The pain of their words hit. Different now, like old scars being poked rather than fresh wounds. Tick-tock. Thomas waved his phone. Hand over the will, get on your knees, and maybe we'll let you crawl away. Otherwise, he drew his finger across his throat. You might also like. Jessica giggled from her corner, but I caught the nervous edge to it. Her eyes kept darting to Vincent, who hadn't moved an inch from his relaxed pose beside me. Such brave words. Vincent's hand stilled on my head. You hear that, Cheryl? They think their friends are coming to save them. I leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his calm presence. The door burst open and 3 men in dark suits strode in. My heart hammered against my ribs as Thomas's face lit up with a triumphant grin. There they are. Thomas gestured at us. Take care of them. Especially that arrogant bastard who thinks he can just do what he wants. The men turned toward Vincent. Their faces drained of color. The leader's knee hit the floor first, the other 2 following instantly. Boss, we didn't know. The leader's voice shook. Mr. Rivers called about a business dispute. If we'd known it was you. Vincent's low chuckle filled the room. Thomas's smile faltered. What are you doing? Thomas stepped forward. Get up and deal with them. Shut up, the leader snapped at Thomas. You have no idea who you're dealing with. What? Jessica squeaked from her corner. Margaret gripped Robert's arm tighter. Vincent leaned forward, his presence electric beside me. Before you leave, do me a favor. Show Thomas here what happens when he wastes my time. The leader rose and crossed to Thomas in 3 quick strides. The crack of his palm against Thomas's face echoed through the room. Thomas stumbled backward, clutching his cheek. Again, Vincent commanded. Another sharp slap sent Thomas sprawling onto the desk. Vincent's hand moved to his jacket. Now get out before I decide this deserves more than just a few slaps. The three men scrambled for the door, leaving Thomas crumpled against the desk, blood trickling from his split lip. Vincent's fingers laced through mine, warm and steady. How was that, Thomas? Did your mafia friends help? Thomas pressed against the desk, blood dripping onto his pristine white shirt. His eyes darted between Vincent and the door like a cornered animal. Thomas's voice cracked. Who are you? The man whose time you wasted. Vincent pulled me to my feet, his touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. Jessica cowered in the corner, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Margaret and Robert huddled together, their earlier bravado shattered. I squared my shoulders and lifted my chin. 5 years of shrinking myself, of swallowing their insults, of pretending their cruelty didn't cut it all fell away. I quit. The words rang clear and strong through the office. No tremor, no hesitation. Thomas's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Margaret reached for me, her hand shaking. Cheryl, dear, let's talk about. I turned my back on them and strode toward the door, Vincent's hand still wrapped around mine. I paused at the doorway, my hand still wrapped in Vincent's. The weight of countless years hung in the air, every insult, every manipulation, every moment they'd stripped away pieces of who I was. I turned back to face them. Thomas pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding lip. Jessica huddled in her corner, makeup streaked across her face. Margaret and Robert clung to each other like children caught stealing cookies. I'll be back. My voice carried across the room, steady and clear. Everything you took from me, my inheritance, my grandfather's property, the shares he left me, I'm coming for all of it. Margaret's face twisted. You ungrateful, save it. I cut her off. You bought a daughter-in-law, not a slave. Should have read the fine print. Thomas pushed off the desk, swaying slightly. You can't prove anything. The documents are gone, you mean these? Vincent pulled a folder from his jacket. Amazing what people keep in their office safes. The color drained from Robert's face. How did you, next time you hire someone to crack a safe? Vincent's smile held no warmth. Make sure they don't work for me first. I squeezed Vincent's hand and stepped into the hallway. 5 years of playing the perfect daughter-in-law, of shrinking myself to fit their mold, it ended today. They'd learn what happened when you pushed a country girl too far. Oh, and Thomas. I called over my shoulder. Keep the ring. Sell it. You'll need the money for what's coming. I stretched lazily in my bed, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vincent's mansion. The silk sheets whispered against my skin as memories of yesterday flooded back. I had went back a day after the company altercation to watch the Rivers family's faces as their lawyer read out the settlement terms. Half their empire, gone. Just like that. My lips curved into a smile. The memory of Margaret's mascara-stained face as she realized what was happening would stay with me forever. Robert's desperate attempts to challenge the will had crumbled when Vincent's lawyers presented grandfather's original documents. And Thomas. He'd sat there pale and silent as his perfect world fell apart piece by piece. The door creaked open. Vincent's footsteps crossed the room, quiet but purposeful. The bed dipped as he sat beside me. Morning, beautiful. His fingers brushed my hair back. His lips pressed against my forehead, soft and warm. How's the heiress of the Swanson Empire feeling today? I opened my eyes to find him watching me, those icy blue eyes filled with something that made my heart skip. Like justice tastes sweeter than I imagined, they never saw it coming. His thumb traced my cheekbone. A country girl taking back what was rightfully hers. Your grandfather would be proud. Grandfather. The thought of him brought tears to my eyes, but for the first time they weren't bitter ones. I'd honored his memory, protected his legacy from the vultures who'd tried to steal it. Thank you. I caught Vincent's hand in mine, for helping me get it back. His other hand cupped my face, thumb catching a stray tear. You did all the hard work. I just provided the muscle. The morning sun caught his profile, softening the hard edges that made others fear him. To me, he was just Vincent, the man who'd given me back my strength when I needed it most. Vincent's fingers intertwined with mine. A knock on the door broke our moment. Marco stepped into the room, his usual composed expression tinged with amusement. He bent down to whisper something in Vincent's ear. Vincent's lips curved into that dangerous smile I'd come to know so well. Someone's at the gate asking for you. Who? Why don't you go see for yourself? His eyes sparkled with dark humor. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my silk robe, and made my way through the mansion's winding corridors. The morning air hit my face as I stepped outside, dew-covered grass dampening my slippers. As I approached the front gate, my steps faltered. It was Thomas. Thomas clung to the iron bars, his designer suit wrinkled, his perfect hair a mess. Gone was the polished businessman who'd lorded over me for 5 years. In his place stood a broken man. I studied Thomas through the iron bars, savoring how the tables had turned. Cheryl, please. His fingers wrapped around the bars. I was wrong. So wrong. I've left Jessica. I ended everything with her. The same words he'd used 100 times before. But this time, they didn't pierce my heart. They didn't make me wonder what I'd done wrong. I love you. His voice cracked. I always have. I was just confused. Marry me. Again. We can start fresh. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, surprising even me. Love me? You never loved me, Thomas. You loved what I represented, the perfect, obedient wife. Who'd do anything to make you happy? That's not true. You made me take contraceptive pills in front of your entire family. My voice stayed steady, calm. You slept with Jessica in our bed. Our bed, Thomas. He pressed his forehead against the bars. I'll make it up to you. I swear. Jessica meant nothing the way I meant nothing. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. How many times did you leave our bed to call her? To apologize to your one true love for being with me? His face crumpled. Please, Cheryl. I'll do anything. You already did everything. I turned away from him, my silk robe swishing against my legs. You showed me exactly who you are. Don't leave me like this. His voice rose, desperate. I need you. No, he needed what I now owned. Half his family's empire. The respect he'd lost. The power that had shifted from his hands to mine. I felt Vincent's presence before I saw him. His footsteps crunched on the gravel, deliberate and unhurried. Thomas's face drained of color. He stumbled back from the gate, nearly tripping over his own feet. I turned and walked straight into Vincent's waiting arms. His hand settled on my waist, warm and steady through the thin silk of my robe. You want to know something, Thomas? I kept my voice light, almost conversational. This Sunday I'm getting married. To Vincent. Thomas's jaw dropped. You can't. You wouldn't. I would. I leaned back against Vincent's chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. And I am. But he's. Thomas's eyes darted between us, terror creeping into his expression as realization hit. So you're Vincent Moretti. The one and only. Vincent's voice carried that edge of danger that made even the bravest men think twice. Now, get off my property before I have Marco escort you out. Marco walks up to them and stay a few steps behind. Thomas stumbled backward, his polished shoes scraping against the gravel. His face twisted into an ugly snarl, so different from the controlled mask he'd worn during our marriage. You'll regret this. His voice shook with rage. Both of you. I still have connections. People who owe me favors. Vincent's chest rumbled against my back. Ash laughed. The sound sent Thomas back another step. You mean those same connections who abandoned you that day? I kept my voice sweet. The ones who watched you lose half your empire without lifting a finger to help. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. This isn't over. You think you're so clever, hiding behind a mobster. I'll show you what real power looks like. Is that a threat? Vincent's tone dropped to that dangerous whisper that made even Marco nervous. Thomas's face went chalk white. He spun around and ran, his expensive suit jacket flapping behind him like a flag of surrender. His footsteps echoed down the street, until they faded into nothing. Vincent's arms tightened around me. You okay? I turned in his embrace, pressing my face against his chest. The steady thump of his heart grounded me. Better than okay. Did you see his face? Saw him nearly wet himself. Vincent's low chuckle vibrated through his chest. No one threatens what's mine and walks away unscathed. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back. Though I wanted to do more than just scare him. A shiver ran through me at his words. The possessiveness in his tone, the casual way he wielded his power, it stirred feelings I wasn't ready to examine. Still getting used to all this. His ice blue eyes studied my face. I pulled back slightly, fidgeting with the hem of my sleeve. It's different. A week ago, I was just Thomas's doormat wife. Now I'm living with a man who makes hardened criminals tremble. And how's that working out for you? A hint of amusement colored his words. Honestly, it's overwhelming. The mansion, the guards, I gestured as vaguely at him. Everything about intense. But I paused, surprising myself with the truth in my next words. I feel safe here, protected, even if I don't quite understand why you're doing all this. Vincent's gaze locked with mine. You want to know something? He shifted closer, his fingers brushing against my cheek. All these years searching for you weren't just about keeping my word. My breath caught in my throat. The intensity in those ice blue eyes made my heart race. At first, it was just a mission. Find Dominic's granddaughter, keep her safe. But the more I learned about you, he paused, thumb tracing my jawline. The more reports I got about this strong woman, who kept going despite everything life threw at her. The way you handled yourself with dignity even when that bastard Thomas tore you down. I swallowed hard, unable to look away from his face. This wasn't the cold, calculating mafia boss speaking. This was raw, honest Vincent. I fell in love with the idea of you long before I saw you. Your resilience. Your grace. His voice dropped lower, rougher. And now that you're here, standing in front of me, his hand cupped my face. You're more than I imagined. You're mine, Cheryl. Not because of any promise, but because everything in me recognizes you as my woman. The possessiveness in his voice sent warmth spreading through my chest. This dangerous man, who could bring cities to their knees, looked at me like I was his whole world. Every report, every detail I gathered about your life, it only made me want to protect you more. To show you what real love looks like. His thumb brushed across my bottom lip. And I will, cara mia. I'll spend every day proving it to you. My heart thundered in my chest at his words. Without thinking, I grabbed his shirt collar and pulled him down to me, crushing my lips against his. The kiss blazed through me like wildfire, his strong arms wrapped around my waist. His tongue swept into my mouth, claiming every inch. I melted into him, fingers threading through his dark hair as years of loneliness and pain dissolved in the heat between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I couldn't help but smile up at him. Well then, Vincent Moretti, I look forward to you proving that to me. My voice came out husky, affected. His eyes darkened at my words, that predatory gleam sending delicious shivers down my spine. His lips brushed against my ear. From now on, no one touches what belongs to me. And you, cara mia, are mine. Vincent's fingers wrapped around my wrist, firm but gentle. The contrast between his touch and his words made my heart skip. He led me through the mansion's winding halls, his presence commanding every shadow. At the grand entrance, he released my wrist and clapped twice. The sound echoed through the marble halls. Within seconds, men poured in from every direction. They lined up with military precision, their faces a mix of curiosity and respect. Vincent's hand found the small of my back. Listen up. His voice carried across the foyer. As some of you witnessed, I made a promise to my woman. He pulled me closer. This Sunday, Cheryl becomes Mrs. Moretti. Men erupted in cheers. Some whistled, others clapped. Marco, standing at the front, grinned wider than I'd seen yet. Vincent clapped again, and silence fell instantly. His smile held an edge of danger and pride. 2 days. I want the grandest wedding this city has seen. Money is no object. He surveyed his men. Make it happen. I looked up at Vincent, finding his ice blue eyes already on me. His expression softened for a moment, just for me, before returning to the stern mafia boss everyone else knew. I watched Vincent command his men, but Thomas's words from earlier still echoed in my head. His threat about mafia connections, how laughable it seemed now. But something nagged at me, a loose thread I couldn't quite grasp. You seem distracted. Vincent's voice pulled me from my thoughts. His hand squeezed my waist. Just thinking about what Thomas said earlier, about having mafia connections. I shook my head. Seems ridiculous now. Vincent's jaw tightened. A flash of something crossed his face, recognition. But it vanished so fast I wondered if imagined it. Thomas Rivers. He rolled the name on his tongue like it tasted bitter. Tell me everything you know about his supposed connections. I frowned. Not much really. He'd brag sometimes about knowing powerful people, especially when drinking. Said his father had friends in high places. I paused, remembering. There was this one name he'd mentioned, called him Uncle Joey or something. Vincent's fingers tensed against my skin. Marco, who'd been standing nearby, exchanged a look with him. Boss? Marco stepped closer. Later, Vincent cut him off, his voice carrying that edge of authority that brooked no argument. He turned to me, his expression softening. Don't worry about Thomas. His threats are empty. But something in the way he said it, the slight tension in his shoulders, made me wonder. Vincent was hiding something. I could feel it. Yet before I could press further, he swept me into wedding preparations, and Thomas became a distant thought. If only I knew then what that name would unleash. I stood before the floor-length mirror, taking in my reflection in the custom Vera Wang gown. The dress hugged my curves before flowing into a dramatic train fit for a mafia queen, though the world only knew half that truth. You look beautiful, Mrs. Moretti. Marco appeared in the doorway, his usual stoic expression softened. Not Mrs. Moretti yet. I smoothed down the silk. How many people showed up? Over 500. Half of New York's elite, plus he cleared his throat. The other half I knew what he meant, the underground elite. The real power players. Vincent waited at the altar in a black tuxedo that made his ice blue eyes even more striking. As I walked down the aisle on Marco's arm, I caught whispers from both sides of the gathering. "That's the Moretti Industries CEO's bride, the Viper's woman. Did you hear how much he spent?" Vincent took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Ready to rule by my side, cara mia." "Both worlds," I whispered back. His smile held that dangerous edge I'd grown to love. "Every kingdom." The ceremony passed in a blur until Vincent's lips claimed mine, sealing our union. The reception that followed was a study in contrasts, politicians mingling with made men, socialites dancing alongside capos. "Your grandfather would be proud," Vincent murmured in my ear as we swayed to our first dance. "To see you take your rightful place." "As what? A mafia boss's wife or a billionaire's bride?" He spun me out, then pulled me back against his chest. "As the queen you were always meant to be. Both worlds bow to you now." I caught sight of Marco directing security with subtle hand signals, keeping the two halves of our guest list separate yet harmonious. This was my new reality, straddling both worlds just like Vincent. "I love you," I whispered against his chest. His arms tightened around me. "Ti amo, my queen." The string quartet's melody shattered as glass rained down from the skylight. Screams erupted as men in black suits rappelled through, automatic weapons trained on the crowd. Vincent's arm shot out, shoving me behind him as Marco materialized at his side, pistol drawn. "Everyone down," a voice bellowed through the chaos. Now, the wedding guests dropped to their knees. Only Vincent, Marco, and I remained standing as a man strode through the parted crowd. His salt and pepper hair and expensive suit couldn't mask the coldness in his eyes. My blood ran cold. "Joey," Vincent's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "Crashing my wedding. That's low, even for you." Joey's laugh echoed off the walls. "When I heard the great Viper was getting married, I had to see for myself." His gaze landed on me. "Though I must say, this is an interesting twist." Thomas Rivers' ex-wife. Vincent's shoulders tensed. "Leave her out of this." "Oh, but she's already in it. Has been since the day she was born." Joey took another step forward. "Did you tell her about her grandfather, Vincent? About how you failed to protect the old man?" My fingers dug into Vincent's arm. This was the Joey that Thomas had mentioned. Marco's finger tightened on his trigger. "One more step and what?" Joey spread his arms wide. "You'll start a war in front of all these distinguished guests. In front of the bride." His men pressed their weapons closer to the hostages' heads. "I don't think so." I gripped Vincent's arm tighter as Joey's cold eyes swept over us. "What do you want?" Vincent's voice remained steady, but I felt the tension in his muscles. "A chat. You and the lovely bride will accompany me." Joey gestured toward the exit. "We have much to discuss. Leave her out of this." Vincent shifted, trying to block me from view. Joey's laugh sent chills down my spine. "Not a chance. She's part of this now." Everything happened in a blur. Two men grabbed Vincent from behind, pressing a gun to his temple. Another pair seized my arms, dragging me away from him. I struggled against their grip, but they held firm. "Marco, drop it." Joey pointed at Marco's raised weapon. "Unless you want to see your boss's brains splattered across his wedding suit. Do what he says," Vincent commanded, his eyes locked on Marco. Marco's jaw clenched, but he slowly lowered his gun and placed it on the floor. The wedding guests remained frozen, watching in horror as Joey's men marched us toward the exit. They shoved us into a black SUV, rough hands forcing our heads down. Someone yanked my veil off and replaced it with a thick blindfold. The fabric scratched against my skin as they tied it tight. "Vincent," I called out, panic rising in my throat. "I'm here, Kara." His voice came from beside me. "Stay calm." The SUV engine roared to life. As we pulled away from our ruined wedding reception, I reached out blindly until my fingers found Vincent's hand. He squeezed back. The men yanked us through what felt like a maze of corridors before shoving us into chairs. When they ripped off my blindfold, I blinked against the dim light. My heart dropped. We were in my grandfather's shed. "Welcome home, Principessa." Joey's gravelly voice echoed through the space. He pulled up a chair, sitting backwards on it to face us. "Let me properly introduce myself. Joey Mineo, the man who should have been running New York's underworld after your grandfather's passing." Vincent strained against the ropes binding his wrists. "You lost that right when you orchestrated that coup." Joey's lips twisted. "Nearly killed me too. Had to spend years abroad rebuilding my empire." He leaned forward. "But someone gave me a reason to return. Someone who knew exactly when to strike." Footsteps clicked against the concrete floor. A familiar silhouette emerged from the shadows and my blood ran cold. "Thomas." The name left my lips in a whisper. My ex-husband stepped into the light, a smug smile playing across his face. Hello, Cheryl. Surprised? You're working with him. I glanced between Thomas and Joey. You were the one who told him about the wedding. Of course. Thomas straightened his tie. When I discovered Joey's connection to Vincent, well, let's just say our interests aligned perfectly. I told you I'll have my revenge. Joey's laugh bounced off the walls. Your ex-husband has been quite helpful. Though I must admit, I never expected Vincent to marry the granddaughter of the man he failed to protect. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Your grandfather, Joey's eyes glinted with malice. Such a proud man, even when the cancer was eating away at his lungs. My breath caught. Grandfather had died of lung cancer, that's what Vincent had told me. But waiting for nature to take its course. Joey shook his head. Too slow for my taste. So I put a bullet in his chest. Made it look natural after all. What's one more failed organ when you're already dying? Shut up. Vincent lunged forward in his chair, the ropes cutting into his wrists. Don't you dare. What's wrong, Viper? Joey's smile widened. Don't want your bride knowing how you failed to protect her beloved grandfather. How you were too late. Heat rushed through my veins. You murdered him. The words came out in a snarl I barely recognized as my own voice. Cheryl, don't, Vincent warned, but I was beyond hearing. He was dying anyway. I screamed, thrashing against my restraints. He was suffering, and you. Joey leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. I put him out of his misery. Should have seen the look in his eyes when he realized who was holding the gun. Not in front of my granddaughter's picture, he begged. So I turned the frame down before pulling the trigger. I'll kill you, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. I swear to God I'll kill you. Cheryl, please. Vincent's voice cracked with desperation. Don't let him. Oh, let her rage. Joey laughed. She has her grandfather's spirit. Maybe I should put her down too, save us all the trouble. The cold metal pressed against my forehead. My heart hammered in my chest, but I refused to give Joey the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. No. Vincent's voice cracked with desperation. Leave her out of this. Thomas stepped forward and struck Vincent across the face once, twice. Blood trickled from Vincent's split lip, but his eyes never left mine. Look at your precious mafia boss now, Thomas sneered. Not so tough anymore, is he? Joey's laugh echoed through the warehouse. He pulled the gun away from my forehead and pressed it against Vincent's temple. What do you say, sweetheart? Joey's fingers tightened on the trigger. Should I paint these walls with your husband's brains? Say yes, and you walk out of here alive. Simple choice, really. Vincent's blue eyes locked with mine. Despite the blood on his face, despite the ropes cutting into his wrists, he looked at me with such tenderness it made my chest ache. You might also like. Don't you dare hurt him, I growled. Wrong answer. Joey dug the barrel deeper into Vincent's temple. Try again. Your life or his, what's it gonna be? Blood roared in my ears. 5 years with Thomas had taught me what a loveless marriage felt like. But these past weeks with Vincent, I'd rather die than watch someone take him from me too. Cheryl, Vincent whispered. It's okay. Tick-tock, Joey sang. What's your answer, Mrs. Moretti? No. My voice rang clear through the warehouse. Kill me if you want, but don't touch him. Joey's eyebrows shot up. He lowered the gun from Vincent's temple, his lips curling into an amused smile. Well, the little wife's got some fire in her after all. Cheryl, don't. Vincent's words cut off as Joey pressed the barrel against my chest. I lifted my chin, meeting Joey's gaze. Do it. Pull the trigger. A sharp crack echoed through the room. Pain exploded across my cheek as Thomas's hand connected with my face. The force snapped my head to the side, copper flooding my mouth where my teeth cut into my cheek. You ungrateful bitch, Thomas spat. After everything my family did for you, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. I turned back to see Vincent's eyes fixed on Thomas, not with rage, but with something colder, deadlier. The look of a predator sizing up its prey. Thomas's words died in his throat. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet as he retreated from that icy stare. Touch her again, Vincent's voice came out soft, barely above a whisper, and I'll peel the skin from your bones. Slowly, Thomas's face went pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he backed away further, putting Joey between himself and Vincent. Joey threw back his head and laughed. Looks like your ex has more sense than courage, sweetheart. But I have to admit that was impressive. Standing up to a gun like that. Maybe you do deserve the Viper after all. The cold metal of Joey's gun pressed against my chest, right above my heart. The pressure increased as he leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. Your grandfather made the same defiant face, you know. Must run in the family. Joey's lips curved into a cruel smile. But in the end, he begged. Wonder if you will too. He tapped the gun against my sternum. One clean shot, right here. Quick and efficient. Vincent strained against his restraints, the chair creaking beneath him. Blood dripped from his split lip onto his white shirt. I swear to God, Joey, shut up. Joey whirled, pressing the gun harder against my chest. You failed to protect him then, and you'll fail to protect her now. He turned back to me, eyes gleaming. Ready to join your grandfather, sweetheart. Don't worry, I'll make it quick just like I did for him. The metal dug deeper into my skin. Joey's finger curled around the trigger, and time seemed to slow. I thought of grandfather's portrait. Of all the questions I never got to ask him. Any last words? Joey's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe a plea for mercy. That's what your grandfather tried in the end. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze. Go to hell. The gun pressed harder, and Joey's smile widened. After you. You might also like 95. Sorry. Just then a deafening crash shattered the tension as the warehouse wall exploded inward. Through the debris, I glimpsed Marco's familiar figure, his gun already trained on Joey. The shot rang out before Joey could react, the weapon flying from his grip. Boss. Marco's voice echoed through the warehouse. Something small and cylindrical arced through the air. The smoke bomb hit the ground with a metallic clank. White smoke erupted, filling my lungs. Shouts and curses pierced the haze. Bodies collided in the chaos, the thud of fists meeting flesh, grunts of pain, the scrape of boots on concrete. Where are they? Joey's voice cut through the mayhem. Find them. Thomas screamed, his voice cracking with panic. My heart pounded against my ribs as I struggled against my restraints. Through the thick smoke, I could barely see my own hands. A warm palm pressed against my mouth, making me jump. Hot breath tickled my ear. Shoo, a voice whispered. Don't make a sound. It was Vincent. Strong hands worked at the ropes around my wrists. Vincent's fingers brushed against my skin as the bindings fell away. Are you okay? His voice was low, urgent. I nodded, rubbing my raw wrists. I'm fine. We need to run. Vincent's lips curved into a smile that sent chills down my spine. No. What? But he squeezed my shoulder, keeping me in the chair. The smoke swirled around us, thick and disorienting. Marco materialized beside us like a ghost, his gun trained on the chaos beyond. Shouts and curses filled the warehouse as Joey's men stumbled through the haze. Thomas's panicked voice rose above the din, calling for backup. The smoke began to thin, revealing the warehouse piece by piece. Joey emerged first, his face twisting into recognition as he spotted us. His laughter bounced off the concrete walls. Well, well. Joey spread his arms wide. Looks like you're not going anywhere after all. Thomas appeared at Joey's shoulder, his designer suit covered in dust. His eyes widened when he saw Vincent standing calmly beside my chair. Armed men stepped out of the shadows, forming a circle around us. Their guns gleamed in the dim light, every barrel aimed at our heads. Surrounded by my best men. Joey's smile widened. What now, Viper? Marco didn't flinch, his stance steady as he covered Vincent's back. The warehouse fell silent except for the echo of footsteps as Joey's men closed in. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. Vincent's laugh echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off the walls with an eerie resonance that made my skin crawl. Marco stepped forward, pulled out a cigar, and held it out. The flame from his lighter cast shadows across Vincent's face as he took a long drag. My heart pounded as Vincent strode past the armed men, claiming an empty chair like it was a throne. His posture remained relaxed, almost bored, as smoke curled around him. What are you waiting for? Thomas's voice cracked. Shoot him. Joey's hand whipped through the air, catching Thomas across the face. The sharp crack made me flinch. Shut up, Joey snarled, shoving Thomas aside. Blood trickled from Thomas's split lip as he stumbled backward. His eyes darted between Joey and Vincent, confusion written across his features. Joey turned to Vincent, a smile spreading across his face. Have you lost your mind, Viper? Death's knocking at your door and you're sitting there smoking. Vincent took another drag of his cigar, the ember glowing bright orange in the dim warehouse. He tilted his head back and released a perfect ring of smoke that drifted toward the ceiling. His silence spoke volumes, filling the space with a tension that made it hard to breathe. I gripped the arms of my chair tighter, watching Vincent's calm demeanor. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat there smoking like he had all the time in the world. Vincent's voice cut through the silence, smooth and deadly as a blade. You know, Joey, I've been counting your mistakes. He took another drag of his cigar, the smoke wreathing around him. Would you like to hear them? My pulse quickened as Joey's face darkened. The armed men shifted uneasily, their weapons still trained on us. First mistake killing Dominic Swanson. Vincent's eyes found mine for a brief moment. He wasn't just Cheryl's grandfather. He was my teacher, my mentor. Joey's jaw clenched. The warehouse felt smaller somehow, the air heavy with tension. Second showing up here today, trying to ruin my wedding. Vincent flicked ash onto the concrete floor. That was unwise. Thomas backed away, his face pale as paper. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. He'd allied himself with the wrong person. Third mistake. Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. Challenging me. In my territory. With these, he waved dismissively at Joey's men. Amateur thugs. Joey's hand tightened. You're surrounded, Viper. Who's making mistakes here? Which brings me to your fourth and worst mistake. Vincent's eyes turned to ice as he stood. You pointed a gun at my woman. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to plummet. Marco hadn't moved. I watched Joey's face contort with rage, his fingers tightening around his gun. What bullshit are you spouting, Viper? Joey's voice cracked. Vincent took one last drag of his cigar before crushing it under his shoe. His eyes locked onto Joey's, cold and predatory. Boys, I think we're done with this little act. Do your jobs. The sound of dozens of guns shifting filled the warehouse. My breath caught as Joey's men turned their weapons away from us, training them instead on Joey and Thomas. What is this? Thomas stumbled backward, his designer suit soaked with sweat. Joey, what's happening? Joey's face drained of color as he spun in a circle, finding himself surrounded by his own men. Vincent rose from his chair. You see, Joey, there's something you should understand. He straightened his tie, the gesture casual yet somehow menacing. In this country, there isn't a single person who'd dare move against me. Every man you thought was yours. He spread his arms wide. They've been mine all along. The warehouse fell silent except for Thomas's ragged breathing and Joey's string of curses. I sat frozen, watching the scene unfold like a carefully orchestrated dance. Impossible, Joey whispered, but his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Nothing's impossible for the Viper. Vincent's voice carried through the Neen warehouse. You should have done your homework before trying to play in my league. I watched Vincent step closer to Joey, his movements fluid and predatory. My heart hammered against my ribs. You know what's funny, Joey? Vincent's voice carried a hint of amusement. You walked right into this. Just like I knew you would. Joey's face twisted with rage and fear. You bastard. Marco appeared at Vincent's side, pressing a sleek black handgun into his palm. The metal caught the light as Vincent's fingers wrapped around the grip. The thing about revenge. Vincent lifted the gun. It's sweeter when your enemy realizes their mistake. Wait. Joey's plea cut through the air. The gunshot cracked like thunder in thin-closed space. Joey stumbled backward, crimson blooming across his chest, the same spot where he'd shot my grandfather. His eyes went wide with recognition before he crumpled to the ground. I gripped the arms of my chair, my knuckles white. The metallic scent of blood filled the air as Joey's body twitched once, then lay still. Vincent lowered the gun, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. For Dominic, he whispered, but in the silence of the warehouse, everyone heard. Thomas whimpered in the corner, pressing himself against the wall like he could sink through it. His designer suit was ruined, stained with sweat and dirt. The warehouse fell silent except for the echo of Vincent's footsteps as he moved back toward me. His eyes found mine, softening just slightly at the edges. Marco collected the gun from Vincent's hand, tucking it away beneath his jacket. The other men remained still, their weapons trained on Thomas's trembling form. Vincent's eyes met mine, a flicker of regret crossing his features. I'm sorry you had to see that, Cheryl. He gestured toward Thomas. What do you want me to do with him? My mind raced, anger and confusion battling inside me. Thomas cowered against the wall, his expensive suit soaked with sweat. I stood up, my legs steadier than I expected. Marco, give me your gun. Vincent nodded once, and Marco placed the weapon in my palm. The metal felt cold, heavy with purpose. I walked toward Thomas, watching him shrink further into himself. I tried to forgive you. God knows how many chances I gave you to just leave me alone. My voice didn't waver. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? Had to keep coming after me, trying to hurt me. Cheryl, please. Thomas's voice cracked. I raised the gun, aiming at his leg. This is for my grandfather. The shot echoed through the warehouse. Thomas screamed, clutching his bleeding leg. I won't kill you. I lowered the gun. But if you ever show your face around me again, I will. Remember that. Vincent's hand found my shoulder as Marco took back his weapon. Clean this up, Vincent commanded his men. Drop him somewhere on the streets. He guided me toward the exit, leaving Thomas's pained cries behind us. Vincent's fingers traced my jawline as we walked to the SUV. You're magnificent, you know that. The way you didn't flinch when Joey threatened us. The steel in your voice when you confronted Thomas. His touch lingered. I chose well. I leaned into his warmth, my heart still racing from the warehouse confrontation. I'm not the same woman who used to cry over Thomas anymore. Marco held the car door open. Vincent helped me inside, then slid in next to me. The leather seats creaked as we settled in. The city lights blurred past our windows. On my phone, news alerts flashed across the screen. Terror attack thwarted, SWAT team rescues newlyweds, terrorists eliminated in warehouse standoff. Vincent's laugh rumbled in his chest. The media always writes the story we feed them. 2 weeks later, we stood on the deck of Vincent's yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. His arms wrapped around my waist from behind as we watched the horizon. Any regrets? He whispered against my neck. I turned in his embrace, studying the face of the man who'd avenged my grandfather, who'd given me strength when I needed it most. Just one. His eyebrow lifted. I wish I'd shot Thomas in both legs. Vincent's laughter echoed across the water. I traced my fingers along Vincent's arm wrapped around my waist, feeling the raised lines of his snake tattoo. Vincent pressed a kiss to my neck. What are you thinking about? The future. I smiled, remembering how steady my hand had been when I pulled that trigger in the warehouse. The old Cheryl would have fainted at the sight of blood, but Vincent's world had awakened something in me, a steel core I never knew existed. I can't wait to learn everything, I whispered. How to run the business side, handle negotiations. I turned to face him, running my fingers along his jaw. Be the queen you need by your side. His eyes darkened with pride and desire. We both knew I'd never be just a trophy wife again. The Rivers family had tried to clip my wings. Vincent had taught me to fly. The yacht rocked gently beneath us as the first stars appeared overhead. In Vincent's world, I wouldn't have to pretend to be less than I was. No more playing the docile daughter-in-law, no more swallowing my pride. As his queen, I could finally embrace every part of myself, both the light and the shadow. The end.